annoying, but I have to accept it. But now, yeah, I now go. I'm going live. So it's now entering. Let's see if we are live. Hello, dear people. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I still don't see the beginnings of... Hello, there's the first one, Ingrid. Hello, Ingrid. Welcome on YouTube. All right, so Dana, I will wait maybe 1 minute that everyone is entering and gets the notification, because do you know what I found out from also people who work together, that only from between half an hour and an hour after I am live they get the notification. So weird, huh? So, but everyone, welcome. Welcome on this 7th live talk with Dana, and I'm very eager to suck up all the knowledge he has to share for tonight, and it will be specifically about Shika nuclear plant, and of course Japan and what's happening there. And I will wait a bit until more people drop in, but maybe you like to introduce yourself. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dana, but Barry just raided with people here, but he says no sound. So there appears to be no sound. Oh, hey Barry, thanks for the raid. By the way, you know what raiding is, Dana? That... Oh. Oh, man. Gosh, now I lost my mouse. Oops. Oh, why does this happen? Hello, Leah in Air. Welcome. Also a channel on Twitch. Thank you for the follow. Oh my gosh, but you can't hear me. So, is that so? I only hear Ray, not Dana. Okay. So, indeed, Ray, indeed, I'm a bit confused now. We all started so in the flow, Dana. But maybe you can... Let me see how I can do that.
Fine. I'm going to duck out, and I'll be right back.
Well, let me try one more thing. And what about now? Thank you all for the following. Wow, welcome everyone.
Hi everybody.
Both good. Now it works. So I fixed it, Dana.
Okay, you're here, Dana. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Ray.
Let's start. I apologize.
As long as somebody fixed me, that's a great thing.
Exactly. Maybe. Yeah. But
That didn't
maybe,
sound very good.
oh gosh. But maybe we can start all like we start all over, and that you again introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org, and I cover nuclear and all things nuclear. And I also, after Fukushima nuclear meltdown in Japan, had spent 6 years of marine research expeditions, 4 to 5 months a year, on the ocean without coming home, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. That's the Pacific Ocean. What we discovered was an extinction level event. We're currently doing research expeditions on the east coast of Canada, the opposite 5,500 miles away, and we're seeing the same attributes. We're seeing an extinction event play out. Tonight we're going to cover, and want my volume a little bit louder. Tonight we're going to cover, is that okay, Ray?
Well, I seem to see that Dana's volume is a bit louder than yours now, Ray.
We'll turn down. Oh, it is so. Look at that. No, Dana is loud. I just turned mine down.
Yeah, now it seems to be better. Ray, you're low.
Lisa's
Okay.
fine.
Oh gosh. What is going on? Oh, maybe now. And what now? And how is it now? I changed
Yeah, I can hear it
something.
go up a little bit. Yeah, you went up a little bit.
Yeah. How is it now? I hear fine, says Leah. Okay, let's continue, Dana, because you are, of course, the most important guest. So go
Thank you.
ahead.
So, looks like your audio is good. Yeah, Sunbeam says it's good now.
Yeah, thank you all for
Okay,
the feedback, by the way, and welcome everyone again. So now I will not interrupt any longer, Dana. Go ahead.
I'll turn down mine another little touch. Global resistance. So everybody's happy with my mic. Let me know. I'll keep an eye on the comment section. I can see everybody in the comment section. So we have a major event in Japan on January 1st. They had an earthquake 13 days ago that was done considerable damage. And I'm going to take you through about 145 clicks of screen captures that I put together to articulate the bizarre story. We do believe that we have at least 2 nuclear fuel pools melted down on the Noto Peninsula, the Chikawa Peninsula, and I'm going to show you maps of that and some stories of that coming up in a moment. If the audio is good on both sides.
I get from everyone that Dana's mic level is a bit too high. Okay, then I can also do something, Dana. So, and now, dear people, how is... so go ahead, Dana. I will check the feedback.
Yeah, and we just keep an eye on it. We'll adjust the audio for everybody accordingly.
Exactly.
And so Dana's still good. Barry says hi, Barry.
Now it's perfect.
Sunbeam likes it. It's perfect. And away we go. So is there anything you want to add in before we jump into the deep end here, Ray? You're good?
I'm ready. Yeah, I can welcome everyone again. And again, for the raid, Barry, thank you so much. And everyone also for the follow. I'm very grateful for growing my channel. And also, of course, check out Dana's channel. And further on, yeah, let's go, because you have a lot to show. Hey, that rhymes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we do. Okay, I'm going to go share screen, and we're just going to go in right straight into the deep end. And we're going to talk about Japan. And we should go sharing screen any second on your side. I won't be able to see your comments while I'm sharing the screen, but Ray will keep an eye on it and she'll let us know what's up. So I'm going to walk you through some headlines for probably at least 20 minutes. And Ray, feel free to cut me off. Now, is that headline cut off?
it starts with, yeah, a bit. I see
The sharing?
23,700.
Yeah, but like it says you are sharing an entire screen. Does that interfere?
It should.
You can read the headline, can you?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. I see a black frame around it.
Yeah, but I'm just talking. Is the word houses?
Housing,
Uh,
yeah. It's
that's
just
clear, is it?
yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so last night it came out that there's 24, roughly. I'm going to round numbers off. 24,000 houses, units, apartments, and houses are secured for the victims, which suggests that you got over 10,000 houses destroyed. And that's important because we're talking about an earthquake over a very large area. So, 300 units of public housing, 5,500 units of private rental housing. This is across Ishikawa Prefecture, was where they had all the damage from the earthquake. And after a 7.6 magnitude Noto Peninsula quake. Now, Japan uses their own scale. It's known as the Shindu scale, and it only goes from 1 to 7. The magnitude scale is the Richter scale, which is the international scale, and that'll come up in a little bit for you. So you're talking about 24,000 houses. They also are talking about, normally you would hear how stoic the Japanese people are, and they don't loot, and they don't steal, and there's no scam artists, but turns out that's not true. And so some of this stuff, they're also talking about child abductions, which is something that really concerns me. And we see this after almost all natural disasters where predators will swoop in and kidnap the most vulnerable of society in their most vulnerable times. So the world's a pretty evil place, and it's heartbreaking when I see stuff like that.
Mm.
And so we got 30,000 people in evacuation centers that they are acknowledging, and these because their homes were destroyed, not just because they're out of power, but because their homes were actually destroyed. And you'll see what's up in the next few minutes. This is shelters. This is unusual because you don't usually see any privacy in these shelters. Now, they've been surviving on one slice of bread and one cup of water for 10 days. So they never got no help. And that's important in the rest of the equation. Why wouldn't they get any help? Because normally after an earthquake, thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers will flood in. Helicopters will be landing all over the place and dropping off food and water and blankets and heaters and generators and medical supplies and nurses and doctors and just this incredible smorgasbord of humanity showing up to take care of the victims. That didn't happen. And so that's incredibly interesting. Why wouldn't that happen? We've never seen that not happen before. And Japan, used to earthquakes, you would imagine that was normal, but it didn't happen. So the indoor privacy system was also used in the Kobe earthquake in the 80s and at a gymnasium recently in Ishikawa Prefecture, the same prefecture. Currently, there's 26,000 sheltering, but other people now have found shelter. The red circle is where they just sent 100,000 jackets, and that's far away from the peninsula. Can you see my mouse on the screen, Ray?
I can, yes. I think so.
Okay, so that peninsula with the little dot in the white circle, and I'm making my mouse go around it. That's the earthquake zone. It's about 100 miles long. And they had a tsunami that done significant damage. Quake hit Japan, steps up quarantine. So there's a lot of people because they don't have any heat, they don't have any food, they don't have any water. Now they become more susceptible to pathogens and viruses. And Shika town is where the nuclear power plant is too. It is one of the communities hardest hit by the disaster. And let me go back for a second. So Shika, if you can see my mouse, Shika is right below the Nano, Nanao. Go down about a half inch below that on this map, and that's where the Shika nuclear power plant is too. At the top of the prefecture, and Wajima and Suzu on the other side was around 4,500 homes destroyed. Down here in Ishikawa, just above the red circle, was 1,400 homes destroyed. The nuclear power plant is located up right here. And apparently that has no damage, but the story is much more bizarre than that. So you have people, due to severity in the area, there's still actually 2,600 people cut off that they still haven't got to 13 days later. I've never heard of that before. And all a helicopter got to do, because it's only 100 miles, they can fly into any town. 14 died, they said, due to health issues associated with the disaster, like stress after being evacuated. But that's not something we're used to seeing or hearing of before. And so, again, that makes me highly suspicious of radioactive fallout. The coastline for 85 kilometers extended out, and that's the extension. It rose up 13 feet, and the coastline extended out up to 250 meters, 820 feet. That's new coastline that's now permanent. And so a lot of the prefecture for 150 kilometers has risen up through communities and roads 13 feet on the average. So this is another spot where you can clearly see with the satellite pictures the extension. So you can see the new coastline versus no coastline, right?
Yeah.
And that happened in 45 seconds. So in 45 seconds, they got a new coastline, 820 extra feet for 85 kilometers of the coastline.
Oh.
So that's a pretty significant earthquake when you lift up an entire coastline for 85 kilometers. And you can see how what happens with that kind of shift in the earth. Large buildings tipped over. And so we expect there's at least 10,000 buildings completely collapse. And in Shizu City, there's actually 90% of the homes are completely destroyed, and there wasn't a building left standing normally out of 5,000 houses. So that's not counting businesses, that's just homes. So around 4,500 homes at the top right hand of the peninsula collapsed. So Mari Yamaguchi is a very concerning when you see that name. That's the cover story from the Japan's government when it comes to nuclear. And so they're promoting satellites to spy on North Korea. And Japan, what's interesting about Japan is they occupied North Korea for 50 years pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And when Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombs were detonated, that's when Japan finally left North Korea. So North Korea was occupied by Japan for 50 years, and Japan's rule was brutal upon the North Koreans. So when the North Koreans were finally free after 50 years of the invaders from Japan, United Nations was formed, and it used to be called the League of Nations, and there were 195 militaries. So they went to North Korea under a police action, and they've occupied it now for 70 years. And so they started off by burning down every village, every community in North Korea with napalm, and called it a police action. And so that was a genocide, what they done to the North Koreans. So for 120 years, the North Koreans have never been freed. They have been completely enslaved. And there's not many cases of that worldwide that we know about. Mari Yamaguchi seems to always come out with the official propaganda for the last 12 years about Fukushima nuclear plant. By the way, if you look at what Australia is doing for solar, I just want to touch on that for 1 second. Australia are forecast for 2023 to be 3 gigawatts, 2.5 gigawatts in 2024, 2 gigawatts in 25 and 26, and 2 gigawatts in 27. So 1 gigawatt is equal to a large nuclear power plant. So you're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, almost 10 nuclear power plants in renewables in just 3 years. So when people think the renewables can't make a difference, then you have to look at stuff like that. Nuclear powered 1,000-year plus albatross around humanity's neck. Well, an albatross is an extraordinary large bird that floats in the wind currents for many years. And now this story, that's reactor 3. So nuclear power plant, 1,000 years Albatross rather. So this is a mixed oxide nuclear meltdown at Fukushima in 2011. At the top of the building were 2 decades of reactor cores, and that's the same thing as Shika. Shika had the reactor cores at the top of the buildings. And this was where they used reclaimed uranium, reclaimed plutonium from nuclear fuel. So it's already gone through a chain reaction. And once it goes through a chain reactions, the fuel is now splitting atoms for hundreds of thousands of years. So for hundreds of thousands of years, the fuel rods, what you call nuclear waste for most people, is emitting atoms. So at the top of these buildings was around 10 reactor cores. And think of each reactor core as 100 times Chernobyl, because these reactor cores are pure uranium, pure plutonium. But Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, and it was a brand new reactor, and it didn't have any fuel pools at the top of the buildings. These reactors had 40 years of reactor cores at the top of the buildings. That's all gone, and there's 4 of those buildings.
Can I ask you something, Dana?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because we were talking about these graphite, but I also read that, if I'm right, that the burning of graphite keeps on going, and that's even more dangerous, or is it? What is the most? Yeah, if you can even, it's both dangerous, of course, but you know what I mean? Is that?
Yes, and I'm just going to let you finish your question. That's all.
Well, it's about are these nuclear plants in Shika and in Fukushima the same, if I hear you well, and not with graphite.
Right, they're pure uranium, pure plutonium.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And which is each of them reactors are going to be 100 times more fuel, like the uranium daughters. And so there's 1,000 uranium daughters, and all of them are toxic to everything with replicating cells. Now graphite it's a terrible, and I'll talk about Chernobyl very quickly, actually, to kind of so people can comprehend it a bit better. In Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, I'm going to give you 3 examples. So the first example is in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. After Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms because of radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. So that was 3,000 kilometers away, I believe. So imagine 3,000 kilometers away, so toxic they closed 9,400 farms. And today there's around 400 farms still closed. And the reason they're closed is because of cesium-137. So what they omitted was the plutonium, which has a 24,000 year half-life. There's 10 half-lives. And that means there's 240,000 years before the plutonium actually goes away. And plutonium is lethal on a scale that it's very terrible isotope. And all the dogs and all the studies, for instance, one study with Dr. Raymond Gilmedy from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute, New Mexico, had used 144 dogs with 1 inhalation of plutonium isotopes. So all the dogs died within about 5 years. They had 3 different tumors: the lungs, the bones, and the liver. And 90% of the dogs died from the bone tumors, because the isotopes go in the bones and mutates the stem cells. But all dogs, when they died, had 3 different types of tumors: lungs, bones, and liver. So it burns a hole through the lung, and it affects the lung, ends up in the bone, and then the body was trying to filter it. Now, a dog's kidneys is 50 times more effective than a human kidney at excreting or filtering out plutonium. So a human is 50 times more vulnerable than a dog is. Now, the biggest isotopes you have to worry about is the curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the fuel rods in beta. And it's a significant amount is what we're talking about. And so curium isotopes, which is why we call a nuclear meltdown of curium, the curium isotope, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which means Plutonium killed all the dogs in all the studies, but the curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, is the most prolific isotope, and it's 20 times more lethal. Okay, so another example. Now, just to go back to that one more time, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom because of radioactive fallout. So what they should have done was abandoned Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom, because when you got to close 9,400 farms, it's obvious the radiation didn't look. Oh, there's a farm. Let's go, guys. It blanketed the entire continent, but it was significant impact on in the farms, so bad that they wouldn't allow them to harvest the products from these farms. So then they also done studies on sex ratios, and the studies are when there's severe poison from radiation, they noticed you'll get more males than females being born, which means you're going to have less of a population, right?
Yeah.
And so they done studies on Europe, which is you guys, Europe's many different countries combined. So in Europe, they studied the male to female ratios, which is what they call a sex ratio study. And what they seen uh, was more males than females. But what they forgot to tell everybody was that you can't do a study and quantify it on humans without also utilizing it for all the species. So whatever happened to the human population would happen equally well to or even worse, because the species are smaller and by proxy more vulnerable, then you would see that manifest. And that's why you would see a decline. If you go back pre-nuclear and trace the history of nuclear, that's when you start to see the decline of the species significantly impacted and dramatically in increments over short periods of time. And and so then the third part of the study, when you look at it, was abortions and miscarriages and Down syndrome and autism. So post-nuclear industry, pre-nuclear industry, autism, diabetes, by the way, basically didn't exist. But once the nuclear industry came along and was able to disperse their poisons into the environment, then we've seen this rise and escalation now and prolific epidemic of diabetes and Down syndrome and autism for children in particular. And so there's a real cause and effect. It shows up very quickly. And after every accident, the first thing studies you're going to see showing up is autism and Down syndrome in newborns and congenital malformations. Uh, uh, Surgeries will escalate significantly. So Japan, for 100,000 children, live births, neonates, and infants, you're going to see around 14,200 children need open heart surgery to correct congenital malformations. And if you don't have that surgery, there's an absurd amount of diseases and illnesses, and they will affect the children, and that the parents will basically have to liquidate their assets to bring the child comfort. And the child won't be able to participate in society, become a burden to the family where they have to dedicate the rest of their life to taking care of that child. The child will never leave the home. And if they're lucky, the child will be functional enough to do the basic stuff in the home. But cancer clusters during the nuclear, by early 1970s, this is when we start to see cancer clusters, or cancer self-epidemic, as they describe it, explode. And the doctors in the 60s, the late 50s and the 60s, described anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout as a biological weapon because of the way it attacks the cells and everything with replicating cells. And so the smaller the animals and insects and birds, and the kids and that, they're much more vulnerable. Insects, like the animal kingdom, is 1,000 times more vulnerable than the human. The child is 1,000 times more vulnerable than the adult. And the adult, at 50 atoms per kilogram, will see permanent lesions to their organs. With children at 50 becquerels a kilogram, you'll see permanent damage to their hearts, for instance. But there's many other things. Fukushima's seen 6 in 10 children with diabetes. Fukushima studies on thyroid glands, cancers, tumors. Now, The thyroid tumor is 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters, and the cancer tumor showed up in children in the thyroids at 2 centimeters was 13,646 out of 38,000. And so pre Fukushima nuclear meltdown, the cancer rate was 1 in a million. Post Fukushima rate, when you scale it up, is 358,000 out of a million. So it's dramatic. Death by heart attacks post Fukushima is dramatic in the numbers. Excuse me.
Yeah, take a sip of your tea. Oh no, you don't have your tea. You have something else. But
Yeah, I
okay,
got hot chocolates.
hot chocolate. Yeah. Well, I got yogi tea with chocolate, so
Oh,
yeah. By the way, Dana, is it okay for you? I did see some questions come by. Is that okay for you to
yeah.
or because yeah, it is like I was talking about, and you as well, about graphite. And Barry says here graphite, like what is in pencils, lead used to be lead, but this is another graphite, huh?
Yeah, they use it as a moderator for the chain reaction to control the chain reaction so it doesn't run away. But they also have to use, like, say, 4,500 gallons of water every minute, a million gallons of water per minute. And so a typical reactor uses so much water it can fill up all the tanks at Fukushima 6 times a day. And the tanks at Fukushima were built to manipulate you into not looking at the reactors. We're going to get to that. I will just try to answer a couple of questions.
I
And
will, yeah, and
oh,
you can,
Barry, it's a lot like the graphite in pencils. Yes, it's
yes,
a lot
and
like that.
yeah, sorry. You can, by the way, maybe also go with your mouse over the comments, and then you can also maybe show it if you like. But I'm not sure if you are capable of, if that's for you also
From my
possible.
end,
Yeah, from your end. I don't know. We should
that,
have tried
that,
out.
yeah, the only way I can do it is if I share the screen.
Okay, no, then let's go.
No, I
I will
don't. I
take
don't
care of
care.
it. Do you see an interesting question?
I'll come back up to the top. I just try to kind of roll down there. Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for finding time and the energy and the effort and the courage to come here about this terrible story. And this is a terrible story, but you're better off knowing uh, this kind of stuff than you are not knowing this kind of stuff. Earthquakes will take to affect sea life. In what countries most likely there will be dead sea life creatures will wash ashore? But how long will it take for the leaking of the reactor after the recent that's Sunbeam after the recent earthquake will take to affect sea life? And in what countries most likely there will be dead sea life creatures will wash ashore? That's a wonderful question. And Tinny Kit Jesse, I'm going to butcher people's name, I apologize. I heard moreover this problem, health and mind problems, dementia and autism. How is this happening? That's two great questions. Are they going for the most unfeasible, worst, most unreliable energy types to scam the taxpayers to death? Yeah. Ocean energy is more efficient than wind. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to these two questions. Sunbeam. Now, the question is about if there is. Now, we don't know 100% that there's a meltdown taking place at the fuel pools at the Shika nuclear power plant. And we're going to come back to those headlines right away in a few minutes and finish out an incredible story I got put together for you about the Shika nuclear power plant. We expect the plume. And so let me bring up and show you what a normal plume, and unfortunately, yes, there's normal plumes from the nuclear meltdowns in 2011. So I'm going to share the screen with you coming any second and just explain to you what radioactive fallout looks like. And the entire screen, and away we go. Here we go. Good stuff. Okay. So I'm going to replace. Now, the model you're looking at is after Fukushima. The one to your left is based on 20 days of radioactive fallout, and to the right is 21 days of anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout from 2011. The Shika plant radioactive fallout will look exactly like this. There'll be absolutely no difference. We're going to go back to that story immediately after this. So this is a Neptunium-239 dispersal based upon TEPCO, the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdown sites. This decays, this is nasty isotope, everything with replicating cells, and it decays to plutonium-239. We also have plutonium-239 dispersal models. Now, to your left is only based on 20 days. You can see the majority of the planet is sprinkled very heavily with a very deadly isotope. In United States, one of the studies was showing 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur per meter detected in the California air. In Canada, it was 220 million atoms of iodine 129 per liter of rainfall, and another study of 20 million atoms of iodine 131 per liter on the west coast, and 220 million atoms was in central Canada per liter. These are stunning numbers. This was a million atoms over the west coast, and these plumes are all within 30 days. Now, on the west coast, which is a very short distance, is about 7 days of North America, Canada, United States. But in Europe, you're getting that plume about right now. If there is a plume from Shika, and we'll run into that again in a moment. So one of the plumes, I'm just showing you multiple plumes of different isotopes. This one of xenon 133 was at about a million atoms per square meter. This is 20 million particles of radioactive iodine 131. The particles are physical particles. They're pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. And your thyroid gland uptakes this and turns it into radioactive hormones. And so for the insects, the birds, the small mammals, this will eventually sterilize them in increments over a few generations. And this causes an endless host of problems, illnesses, and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, and later Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia are all notorious adverse side effects of radioactive fallout. And that's just the beginning of it. These are literally the entire medical textbook gets thrown at you when you get poisoned with this kind of, because your immune system also becomes compromised immediately. So the West Coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine 129. So this would have saturated the thyroid glands of the bees, the insects, the fish, the birds, the animals, the mammals, and all humans. And then the children in particular, their thyroids were saturated. And that means they're producing a prolific amount of radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. And the pituitary gland in your brain stores a lot of the hormones that your thyroids normally produce. And it's such an important gland. It's in your brain. And what happens is now you're saturated with radioactive hormones that act like the normal elements in the periodic tables. But they're not normal. Your body doesn't recognize it. And the response is your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And so when you're getting a prolific amount, your body has to attack every single atom and the damage it does every second. So every second, each atom will pulse energy almost at the speed of light. Your body has to repair everything that it damaged. You could damage a million cells. Your body can't repair that. So it's going to kill a million cells or harm it. Your body's going to try to repair all of that, and it's going to try to build a sarcophagus/tumor around the original isotope, which is considered a foreign invader. Your immune system doesn't have an immune trigger to defend against it, so it attacks it. It'll do that for the rest of your life, and these isotopes pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second inside your body. And there's many other side effects of this where if you got gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas in your body, they don't mingle. And what happens is they hit each other, they change direction almost at the speed of light. It's known as a break-in effect, a Bromstein lung effect in German. And it was discovered by a German. They call that X-rays. So you're in the forest, the insects are getting full body X-rays because you have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas from 80 years of fallout But as you can see by the numbers I'm showing you, Fukushima was a pulse event, which meant you had enormous, prolific, unbelievable amounts of releases. We're going to cover that coming up a little bit later. And I'm just trying to introduce you to what the plume from Shika nuclear power plant, we're going to go to those headlines in a minute, is capable of. This cesium-137 plume forecast for North America and Europe onto March 24th, 2011, was the France's government, IRSN, and they estimated it was 1 to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air of cesium-137. So when you see those worldwide plumes, it's appropriate to suggest that it's a catastrophe for every citizens of the world, but also for every living creature worldwide. The numbers in Tokyo suggest it should have been abandoned and still should be. The numbers are so high. This was another model of Xenon 133 based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. So this is still very early in the radioactive fallout. So right now we're in day 13 of Shika. If Shika melted down, and I'm just about to go over there, then you want to look at this model and say, okay, that's coming right at me. That's only 20 days. This model was based on 40 days of radioactive fallout. This model is based upon cesium-137, 134, and 5 times iodine-131. And then these models all generally are based upon the same time frame, 20 to 30 days of radioactive fallout. The left-hand bottom of your picture is based on 26 days of radioactive fallout. These are all based on Fukushima models, but none of them are actually including the entire inventories of the reactor cores and the fuel pools, which I'm going to help articulate coming later. Radiation in the Pacific Ocean, this model is based on 6 years of dispersal if you just poured it into the ocean. But we didn't just pour it into the ocean. It went airborne, covered the entire planet in about 26 days. So the model of the ocean should have been updated for about 3 weeks. The ocean would have looked like that and got worse every day for the next million years. This model here is based on 40 days. I'm going to speed it up. This is the NOAA American government model, and it's only based on a fraction of the inventories that were released.
Can I ask you something, Dana?
Sure.
Because I know NOAA. Is that NOAA also now showing? Because they're very up to date with what's happening in the atmosphere. Are they now also showing signs of that there is a plume?
From Shika?
Yeah.
No. And so let me explain that. That's a great question, by the way.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Sorry.
That's a perfect question. Okay. So I got a great way of explaining this one. You're just gonna like it, no matter what. If I can bring it up. Let me try. I forgot to share screen. A little slow on a Saturday. Here we go.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna show you what happened at Fukushima, because it's really interesting. So I got a perfect picture here somewhere to articulate it. Okay, so here's reactor. Let me get rid of that. Here's reactor 3 and reactor 4. So reactor 3 to your left and reactor 4 to your right. These buildings were 65 meters tall, 190 feet tall, 19-story buildings, and they were 50 meters wide, 150 feet wide. These reactors at the top of the buildings that no longer exist had approximately 10 reactor cores stored in the fuel pools because we don't have a repository anywhere worldwide, let alone in Japan. So they're kept, the reactor cores at the very top of the buildings in pools, deep pools full of special water. So there's going to be no mistaking that that's gone. And here's what's really interesting about this. So they're not going to come out and tell you if Shika, because the nuclear industry, as far as I can tell, can't survive another meltdown anywhere on the planet. And so in 2013, 2 years after Fukushima, the building to your left looked like that. To your right is the American, the Canadian is not there, but they've done it. United States and Australian media. So you got BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes, top right hand corner. CBS, Seth Dorn, which is a senator's son, which is the biggest media in the United States. ABC, Cecilia Vega, which is the biggest media in Australia, and she's currently a White House press club for CBS and PBS. And in the bottom, left-hand corner, you have the War Machine, CNN. They're pretending they're in the fuel pool of the building to the left. So if Shika melts down, they're probably going to do the exact same thing. There's no way they're going to tell us. And so that's why the story I'm going to show you tonight is so important, because we've been following this intensely since January the 1st. Now, normally I'm off covering nuclear stories. I do a 2-hour show 5 days a week, typically, when I'm healthy. And the people to your right are just a fraction of the media. Now, I jimmied the picture together so you can understand that they lied to you once, and more than once, obviously. Don't think for a second that they're going to hesitate at all to do it to you again. So here's unassailable documentation to the right of the media lying to you, pretending they're in a building that doesn't physically exist. And so the question you really need to ask yourselves is that how bad is it that they're willing to go out and pretend that they're in a building that don't exist? It must be incredible bad for the media to make up a story, because you can't just have CBS Seth Dorn and BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes and ABC Cecilia Vega doing the lie. They're producers, the entire studios, everybody that participated in those corporations have to go along with the lie for the lie to work. All the universities have to participate in that lie for them to come out in the media and pretend they're in a building for that lie to work. Greenpeace has to participate in that lie, because if anybody tweets out the picture on the screen with a lot of influence, the gig is up. And nobody tweeted it out. Now, I shared this particular picture with all the anti-nuclear movements, and nobody would repost the picture. So, Reactor 3, we're coming back to Shika now. Let's go back to the Shika headlines. So, she done a story yesterday, the 1,000-year-plus albatross around humanity's neck, shows the picture of a completely melted reactor with 2 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores also gone. And each of these buildings are worse than all nuclear meltdowns worldwide combined. Just a single building. Fukushima has 4 of those buildings. It's a catastrophic event. And the author says Japan began dumping this poison in late August of 2023. But this is day 6, 2011. So the author is trying to perpetrate a propaganda by suggesting that nothing got out of there, and this is what we've been battling for many years, is suggesting that nothing got out of there. In fact, they suggest it was equal to 3 grams of sugar. That's from a South Korean professor of quantum and nuclear engineering. Japan's empress to visit the quake-hit area when the time is right. In other words, why ain't you going there now? When you see all kinds of posturing like that, you really got to be concerned. So let's look at some of the damage and get into it. There's 2,500 people still isolated. And this was yesterday, 12 days later. So why is these people isolated when all they got to do is fly in? The whole peninsula is only 100 miles long. And so if they're isolated, just fly in the big helicopters the military has and drop off water and drop off some food and blankets and fuel and take some terminally sick people out to areas where they can be helped. Now, this particular cloud, I don't have 100% evidence left, right, or center, but what I'm assuming this cloud is a uranium cloud from one of the explosions, if there was an explosion. And this cloud, whenever they see the word UFO, And where this was taken to, it's an interesting cloud, isn't it?
Hmm.
And so they say this is a standard mounting cloud, but then why didn't everybody recognize it?
And of which date was this, Dana? Or according
This
to
was yesterday, I believe, or the day before.
really? That's a weird
Okay,
cloud.
and so Shika, you can see Shika in the center, right? Everybody sees Shika almost in the center of my screen. That's where the nuclear power plant is too. And over here is where they took the picture of the cloud, which is not very far away. So it's 100 miles away, basically. 110, 120 miles away. So it's not a very long distance for a cloud to move. And after Iraq and Afghanistan, 2001, what we noticed was these uranium clouds hanging over Baghdad. You probably heard the connotations of the shock and awe. And what they were using were depleted uranium munitions to bust into the deep bunkers 100 feet underground. That was the official story. But what a lot of smarter people than me noticed back then was that these clouds were lingering in all the photoshops, or all the photo video rather coming out, was these weird clouds in the background that were there every day for about 6 days straight. And everybody was trying to figure out why are the clouds the exact same? Because a lot of people were saying, well, you're faking it. You must have shot it all on the same day. But it wasn't. This cloud was a depleted uranium cloud that was in the background. I do believe that this is a one of the depleted uranium clouds. like There was so much released from the meltdown at the Shika nuclear plant that now this I could be wrong, absolutely, but I'm worried about something like that. That worries me when I see something like that.
Hmm.
It's more evidence that I have to put into the equation for later. So another interesting one was the whole coastline was torn up. All the communities were ripped to pieces and buildings flattened everywhere. Would you move back into a place like that where the earth lifts up 13 feet and everything is cut off? You can't get in there. Even today, there's a couple of thousand people who still don't know if they're doing okay. No communications. We don't have any information on them. But an interesting story was mortgage relief for the quake hit homeowners. They're going to give 37 million yen for land and housing, which is roughly $342,000 Canadian at a low interest rate to people who lost their homes. So they're desperate to get people to rebuild. But why would you rebuild in an earthquake zone that destroys everything around you every so often? See, you're going to lose your money eventually, right? But you do see connotations like that after Fukushima, for instance. That's the exact same thing they've done. Uh, the Alps water disinformation and fake photos surged on social media. So I didn't show you the pictures of all the pictures of the melted reactors in Japan, but you can't treat the water. So I'm going to come back over just in case we got some comments. So I want you to think about this. You got a nuclear meltdown. You're going to pour water over a melted reactor core. If you take 2 liters of it and put it at a bus station, leave it there for a million years, or a subway, everybody walks past it, dies that day. That's how toxic we're talking about it. You can't filter this toxicity out. It doesn't work that way. It's like taking a magnet and demagnetizing it. It's not something we've worked out yet. And so when you're talking about so much inventory is getting released at Fukushima, was 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. Each fuel pool probably had 5 reactor cores. So when you're pouring your water over it to cool it down, per se, then the water is picking up actual fuel particulates. If you put that in a container, a large container, like you have 1,000 large tanks there, then what happens is this settles right away to the bottom. You got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. They hit each other and they cause a chain reaction and burn a hole through the bottom of it, like happened in Moyak in the Soviet Union, like happened at Hanford Nuclear Waste Site in Washington. And just to touch on that for 1 second, that the Hanford nuclear site where they made the plutoniums for the original nuclear bombs, they dumped 450 billion gallons of sludge from a nuclear chain reaction directly into the soil in just one emittance. That they admit to doing that. So for the average person, it's hard to comprehend 450 billion gallons outside of. That's a lot, Dana. Well, let me explain to you what that lot actually means. It's the equivalent of having a 6 foot wide aquarium, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. And per liter, if you took a couple liters of this at a subway, hit it in the wall, everybody walked past it, dies that day for a million years. So we're talking about inconceivable toxicity and enormity of it. It was dumped directly into the soil, which is uphill slightly 100 feet away from a massive river known as the Columbia River, which feeds into about 25,000 farms downstream and ultimately a couple of million people for their drinking water and for doing their laundry and clothing and everything else. But also, it goes directly into the Pacific Ocean ultimately. And so this industry is way past its usefulness. It's a threat to everything with replicating cells. Let's look for any questions yourself, Ray, or do you notice any
Yeah.
questions that we can jump on? Go ahead.
Well, I see one comment of Barry from a donut shop chimney, I guess. That is that the donut shaped. I wish it was true, but it's always, yeah, we need humor in life as well. But yeah. Questions? Let me see if there are questions. I think it was more
Yeah,
earlier that it's,
I'm going back to the comments.
yeah, I don't see right now. I see one of Ziggy, but that was really a while ago. Why does all of it go north and not so much south? But
Uh,
it's
yeah, that's a great question. Let me see if I can find you a better model of the radioactive plume. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. And I'm going to show you how Japan's radioactive fallout works and how it disperses worldwide in real time. I'm sorry, I'm lost here. Okay, here we go.
and you say if you need a short break, Dana, for drinking or something. You just
you, you you see my shows, you know what I'm like. I'll go for 2 hours and
I
I
know,
barely
I
take
know.
a breath.
But I like to take care of you, your well-being, and that you have
Thank
enough
you.
drink.
You're a hustler.
Good.
Unfortunately, I like to abuse myself by beating the crap out of nuclear, excuse the language, by beating the daylights out of the nuclear industry. So this model is France's model of radioactive dispersions from Fukushima based on, I believe this one is 16 days. I'll let you know in a second. Yeah, this model is based on 16 days. Let me start this again of radioactive fallout. So watch it coming out of Japan. So you can see that's Japan where it's coming out over right in that corner. And yeah, there we go. It's better. Now, this is based when the model stops for, I believe, at 16 days. Or, oh, this one is based, now, so we're at 31 days later. I think this one stops at, yeah, 31 days. So let's move it over there. So you see, this is France's government based upon cesium-137 of 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. Now, you can't just have cesium. And think of 10 million atoms in a cubic meter of air. Or think of the water in Fukushima tanks. So 50 atoms, for instance, in your diet per kilogram is permanent lesions in your organs. So imagine trying to filter, you can take 200 of these atoms, put them on the head of a needle, and you can't see it. So how are you going to filter something that tiny? Like, how are you going to filter that many out? So it can't be done. You have to contain everything because you can't filter it.
Hmm.
So when they say they're filtering water in the tanks, it's treated and everything else, it's ludicrous to suggest it because if there was such a system as the Alps, there was another system, the Areva, there's another system of the Siri system for filtering atoms from the water. None of those work because the minute you try to do that, your filters are so radioactive you can no longer get in the same building. After 20 minutes, it's a lethal dose just to run past these filters. The filters need to be 6 foot thick lead, and you can only use them for about 20 minutes, and you would have to change them.
So, wow. This
So,
enters now, by the way, what you say.
yeah, so you can't filter that, see?
Mm.
Now, what really happened, though, you're seeing the plume. So the plume covers the entire planet, and this is based on 31 days after the earthquake, which is 25 days after the last reactor blew up. So this is less than 30 days, and all the models, by the way, are less than 30 days, and they show the entire planet covered in radioactive fallout. So there really isn't any way to escape it. Any countries with large mountains run into an extra problem where the plumes will come in the form of clouds, rain clouds in particular. And so when those clouds, they're heavy, so they hang low. They'll come into your coastlines, they'll hit your mountains. Then they start to lose their payloads. And when I'm talking about clouds, I mean clouds that could be 100 foot backed up, 100 miles backed up off the mountain. So clouds will come in 100 miles of clouds, thick, wide, and they'll hit the mountains, and they have to lose their payload to rise up and go over the mountain. And so a lot of that will run right back down to your coastline, but it also runs down through your fresh water. As you can see, there is nowhere you can go where you can breathe the air. There is nowhere you can go where you can drink the water. It's not going to be contaminated. And when I talked about how Chernobyl contaminated Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom by closing 9,400 farms, then they should have abandoned those countries because that acknowledged that you can't just contaminate the farms, you then contaminated all the fresh water, which is justification for abandoning your country. So think about that statement: a simple accident could invoke abandoning your country. So right now we're concerned that if they have a nuclear meltdown at the fuel pool in Shika, and the evidence I'm going to show you coming up in a second strongly suggests that, and I showed you earlier how they faked being in the fuel pools of reactor 4. By the way, they've done the same thing for reactor 3 at Fukushima. It's not a big stretch to suggest they'll do it again. So we can come back to that. But we want to continue with the headlines from Shika. I'll just move past the OP system. And they allege they're going to take fuel out of reactor 2. Reactor 2 has no containment. That's 100% meltdown. And so now they already faked reactor 4 I showed you earlier. They've done the same thing for reactor 3. Now they're starting to do the same thing for reactor 2 at Fukushima, Japan. International IAEA is suggesting that the reactors didn't melt down as of July the 13th, 2023. They moved the goalpost on us. Japan designated Noto Peninsula earthquake. We're back to the earthquake. An extreme disaster 2 days ago. The big question is, why did they wait so long when it was clear from day one that this was a catastrophic event? Now, this story gets crazy. Japan quake stresses nuclear plant beyond design limit. Powerful earthquake in central Japan inflicted stress on parts of a local nuclear power plant that exceeded the limits anticipated in the facility's design. That's the site, but that's of several years old. Now, they said the quake measured a maximum seismic intensity scale on Japan's Shindu scale of 7. So when they say maximum 7 on the country's seismic intensity scale, they're talking about the Shindu scale, which is 7, which is 10 out of a 10 on the Richter scale. In Shika, Shika is the community we got no footage of, except for a few collapsed houses and destroyed roads, main roads, and telephone poles all leaning over. But we got very, very, very little out of that community. So they had a 7 out of a 7 earthquake right alongside of the nuclear power plant. But don't worry, this story gets even worse. Way worse. They had tsunamis. They had a major fires where over 200 houses and businesses burnt down. And this place was a business district for over 1,000 years. And so this 1,000 years, they've never had this experience. That was some pictures remind me to talk about the tsunami. The tsunami, they didn't warn people till an hour later. The tsunami came in immediately. So they failed on purpose, I would assume. There's over 1,200 landslides. We're assuming they left the landslides in place and they wouldn't allow anybody like the Japanese, the Americans, China, not the Japanese, sorry, the Americans, China, and India were very vocal that they wanted to send in rescue teams with their own dogs, their own equipment, completely independent and funded by those countries. The Japanese would not let them go in there, and we've never seen that before. We're talking about a 100-mile peninsula with multiple communities still abandoned today, maybe a dozen communities still abandoned 13 days later. They won't let anybody fly over it, and we've seen absolutely no logical reason for that to happen outside of it must have been a nuclear meltdown. So this is a tsunami coming ashore in one of the communities, and this person had turned around and picked up an elderly lady at the last second, and now he's driving through this. He just managed to get her in the truck 10 seconds before that, and now they're trying to get out of there, and this is the last where they actually got out of there.
And to be clear, this is in the here and now. This is a Shika.
So this started January the 1st of 2024, 13 days ago. That's right in Shika. And they had over 1,200 landslides and 1,200 major aftershocks. And so this is an incredible amount of damage we're talking about. This is one of the landslides. And again, I know this doesn't give a lot of context, but it gives you some context of all the communities out on the peninsula look like they're torn apart. Houses are collapsed, and these houses are very old houses, a lot of them, and a lot of them are new houses built to really stringent codes, and they collapsed. Now, the Japan Times, this is where the story goes insane. So I heard this story over several times over a few days before this, but this was 2 days ago. The Japan Times, which is the biggest media in Japan, is the official mouthpiece of the Japanese government. So when the Japan Times comes out and talks about Shika plant and tells you that according to the electric power company, the quake measured an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, which is 7. So when it comes to the scale, there's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 6, 6.5, 7. So it's not like there's 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 with the Richter scale. The Japan scale only goes from 1 to 7. So you're talking about an 8 on the Richter scale. In the basement of the number 1 reactor building at the Shika nuclear power plant in Nishikawa Prefecture. So I got to come over here because that's almost too much for me to take. How can you have an earthquake in the basement of a building? Anybody want to explain that one to me? And we're talking like 8 out of 10 on the Richter scale. And they said there's only a few bumps and bends on the site is all they can find.
Yeah,
I can't rationalize that statement. And it's repeated multiple times. What do you think, Ray? Any input on that?
Well, it occurs to me that they even talk about tremors. Tremors. I mean, that's new. That's also new. And by the way, to come back to earthquake and here in the Netherlands specifically, I believe in Europe we're used to the Richter scales to mention that, but Japan has other.
The Shindo scale.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe you can shortly make summary how that, because we are not used to it in Europe. Maybe it's
okay.
nice.
So the best thing for me to do is share the screen and bring out the calculator, and we'll come right back to this screen when I finish that part. So I'm going to bring out the big calculator. Anytime you're ready, Mr. Calculator, come on out. Okay. So what you're going to do is I clicked too many times. So you're going to take the the Richter scale, which is 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Richter scale, it's in thousands. In other words, when you get, say it's a 5 earthquake, so you got a 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, all the way up to 10. Then you got a 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, all the way up to 7. Then you got a 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, all the way up to 8. Whereas the Japanese scale is 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, all the way up to 7. Okay, so what happens is you're going to take the Shindu scale, which is based on 7, and you're going to take the Richter scale, which is 10. So you're going to divide 7 into 10, and you got 1.428. So their version is you got to multiply. There is a upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, which is a 6. But we're going to go 5.7, which is not how the scale works, but it gives them a little leeway. So 5.7, which was times 1.428, 1.3, right? But 1.428 is an 8.1 on the Shindu scale, or the Richter scale. Right, so what I done was we took the Richter scale, which is 10, divided by 7, and each one is 1.428.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the 1.428, you're going to multiply it by Japanese earthquake, and we'll duck out of here, come back over to the screen.
Yeah.
So imagine getting an 8 out of a 10 on the Richter scale only in the basement of one building. Like I can't I don't know how to articulate something so bizarre.
It's bizarre, and by the way, I watched a couple of your shows as well. By the way, everyone, please subscribe to Dana's YouTube channel because he's being shadow banned, and the numbers keep on staying underneath a certain number, Dana. But yeah,
Yeah.
to come back to now I forgot my train of thought. Well, let's go. Oh yeah, now I know because I watched your live streams and then I saw that what they showed of the Shika nuclear plant was only the upper parts.
Yeah, it
That
was
that was
one of
weird.
the that was the only reporter that went to the town,
Yeah,
and he showed the very tops of the buildings
yeah.
only. I never
That's
seen nothing like that before.
that's yeah.
But I don't believe that was a current picture. I think they just took an old picture, cropped it,
Mm,
because by the time she was there, they had a lot of snow, and we didn't see any snow in any of the pictures on the edges of the roof or anywhere else. So it was pretty obviously this was a recycled picture.
mm.
Uh, I'm just looking at any comments just in case. We're going to come right back over to the headlines unless Ray got something on her mind she wants to throw out there.
Well, no, for me it's fine. You can, if you like, continue. I have also for now not really questions to what you have told yet. So, and what I wanted to ask, I did ask. So, go ahead if you like.
Oh, yeah, I see Barry
And
on my website. Thank you, Barry.
yeah, thanks Barry for everything and checking things. By the way, I will check if there are still other questions.
Oh, yeah, other sites, yeah.
Um,
You want to have a little boo around?
no, no, I see no particular questions at the moment. So
Okay, well, let's keep her rolling then because we
yeah,
still got quite a bit to get through on Shika alone. Excuse me. All right, here we go again. All right, I got to share screen first. Let's share the screen. And we're going to come back over to Shika for a few more minutes. And allow. Okay, so we're sharing screens again. Back to Shika. I'm already right there.
yes.
Okay, so this story was the Japan Times. That's where we left off. You can see the top of Japan Times, which is the big media in Japan, trying to convince us that the quake measured an upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7 in the basement of the number one reactor building at a Shika nuclear power plant in Ishikawa Prefecture. You like, I've never heard tell of an earthquake in a basement. An earthquake, the fault line is 150 kilometers long. So the earthquake was 150 kilometers. You can't just have it coming up a pinhole in the basement of a nuclear power plant. And so I think they're suggesting, or somebody's trying to warn you there's a meltdown. Is because how can you have a upper 5, which is 8 on the Richter scale, in the basement of a single building, particularly a nuclear power plant? It's I'm so lost for words that I'm assuming somebody's trying to warn us.
Yeah, but can I by the way in between it has got to do with what you were talking about with that basement. I guess these buildings were calculated like all buildings in Japan with earthquakes because they know they can expect earthquakes. Or is that a
Yeah.
weird question that these buildings have a certain protection for earthquakes or is there a max for Richter scale?
Well, yeah. Well, there kind of is, but there is no protection when the earthquake is in your basement. So
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
the whole there
So.
was 150 kilometers that rose up 13 feet.
Mm,
There was 85 kilometers of the coastline extended out an extra 820 feet. And so this is not isolated to a tiny spot. It doesn't. So these buildings cannot handle a 13-foot discrepancy. First off, you're going to disconnect the water lines, and the fuel pools need to be replenished every single day with about 120,000 liters. And so that's a significant amount of water per minute. And if it doesn't get that water, the minute the fuel rods are exposed, they catch fire. They burn at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures, and they ignite the fuel pellets, the uranium plutonium fuel pellets. They burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and they don't need oxygen. And so that will evaporate all the water within a few minutes once that chain reaction starts. And the inventories we're talking about in the fuel pools is probably 5 reactor cores in each fuel pool. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of each reactor building because you don't have a repository. So we're talking about an inferno. We're talking about the proverbial China syndrome, and we're talking about temperatures that will atomize an aerosol and then ionize and radiate everything it comes in contact with. So it will consume the building and all the I beams and steel and cement and everything else will be atomized in aerosol but also ionized and radiated. So it becomes a weapon against humanity and the 8 million species. And so the earthquake, when they're suggesting the earthquake is the intensity was in the basement of these types of numbers, that's not, there's, because I cover the Japan Times all the time. And that's somebody trying to warn you, is what we're listening to, right? They're really trying to warn you. And there's many incidences. Now we know Shika, many houses are collapsed, but we got very little information. We got a few pictures of the main road and a couple of pictures of houses that are completely shaken apart. We know there's 1,200 landslides. We know on both sides of the nuclear power plant, to the south was 1,400 houses collapsed in Ishikawa, and that north of it in Shizu there was 4,500 homes destroyed. And Shika is right on the fault line itself that was considered dormant. And it was for about 3,000 years, and now it just ruptured. But you have 4 tectonic plates meets there also. So you have a north. The tectonic plates, by the way, are just about 50 miles away from the nuclear power plants. And you have 4 of them meeting in the same spot. And again, this is a disaster we're talking about. This is Ojima, which is the northern part of the island. And this is very confusing. These are police officers, and we can tell by the uniforms they're wearing. These are police officers' uniforms. And these are forensic investigators, and what they're looking for is dead remains in Wajima. where 200 homes and businesses burnt to the ground. And so imagine 200 houses burning. There's no way you can get in there. Now, for 10 days, we had never seen a single piece of heavy equipment in any of the pictures. For 10 days, we never seen fire hoses. For 10 days, we never seen ambulances. For 10 days, we didn't see any helicopters going in or coming out. I've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, and now
So,
you mentioned that, Dana, I see of Barry. So perhaps no Haleys because of radiation then there. No help, no water, food droppings.
right, I've had a lot of polls about that subject.
Mm-hmm.
My shows was should Japan rescue the tens of thousands of people abandoned by the government in the earthquake wasteland?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm assuming. When you start adding up this whole picture, and I'm methodically taking you through a lot of it, and I've been glued to this story, trying to work out what is going on
Mm-hmm.
for since January the 1st. But it wasn't until around January the 4th or 5th that it struck me that wait a second, oh my goodness, we got a meltdown at the fuel pools in Japan at Shika nuclear power plant because we were seeing all the damage on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is completely, there's no other logical excuse. Like Barry said, they're not sending the helicopters in. They don't want pictures, right? Because the helicopter got a crew, the crew all got cell phones. It's going to be really easy to go click.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, holy smoke, that's smoke coming up from the Shika plant.
Yeah.
And if they're close enough, then you got the last thing they want to do is give someone like me, who knows what a plant is supposed to look like, footage.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you give me footage,
Yeah.
I can extrapolate absurd amount of documentation,
Yeah.
and because I'm very honest and I'm very open, and I always provide the documentations for my assertions, and I've been at this for longer than I should be, because there should
Mm-hmm.
be like hundreds of people out there educated now at this stage, because I've been at this relentlessly for many, many, many years. And I'm a little bit shocked that I always felt I would build up a lot of resistance and educate a lot of people, and then they would come out and do all the work. I can sit back. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
And
And
so, go
but
ahead, yeah.
but you see possibly also the other question, which can, if you like to answer it, and then I will not disturb you any longer. It's this one. Can it be seen
Uh,
from space by like weather companies too? Private
absolutely,
planes with
absolutely,
Geiger
yeah.
teller,
But,
Geiger,
but we're and
yeah,
Geiger counters, yeah.
yeah.
And so we're not seeing any report. Well, it might be out there, but I'm not phoning it. I'm looking for it, and they're very select in the pictures from the satellites. But see, the question is, normally the mainstream media will take their helicopters, because a lot of media in Japan has helicopters, and will just go fly over because you can't drive in there by roads because there's around 1,200 landslides, and there's another aftershock every 7 minutes, basically. So it's very difficult to rescue anybody, because if you go in the building, you got an aftershock, you got to run out. Now you're going to wait 2 or 3 minutes, say, okay, it's safe to go in now.
Mhm.
As soon as you get in there, 2 or 3 minutes later, you got another aftershock. And you're going to do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 13 days. So it's very difficult to do any kind of rescue. And because so much shaking, such volatile shaking. Now, the big question was, they said they had 10 airplanes, but there's no airports there. There's nowhere to land there. You can't even drive from community to community if the roads are torn apart. So why would they say they had 10 airplanes there when you can't lie? Why won't they let the Americans go in? Why won't they let China go in, their rescuers? Why don't they let India rescuers, who are already on the drop of a hat to fly in their own specialty search and rescue teams with their own equipment, their own dogs, and start rescuing people?
Mhm.
But we didn't see it. The first 10 days we've seen zero heavy equipment, zero ambulances, zero fire trucks, zero, um, no helicopters. So, like, again, why don't they just put, now I make jokes of it, right? So, like, I was trying to understand, why don't they take pallets, which are big pieces of 4 foot by 4 foot blocks of wood, and load it up with food, medical supplies, and clothing, and blankets, and generators, and and just go in under the helicopter and just lay it down and fly away again. Because these people are living for 10 days on one cup of water, not a glass of water, but one cup of water a day and one slice of bread a day. Now, why would they do that one? When it's so easy for a helicopter to go in and drop off soldiers to help them to clear the roads, and their roads in their communities are still not cleared. So the only thing makes any sense, because a lot of these landslides are bamboo. So me or you can go in with machetes and clear it out in 4 or 5 hours, and a small backhoe can come in and clear that section of road. In the communities itself, the majority of the rubble we're looking at is easy to be cleared. You would just go in with a backhoe, a tractor, and clear it out yourself in a half an hour, an hour. 10 days later, that's still not cleared out. And so, in other words, you got all these communities, they got their own construction equipment, they got their own bulldozers, their own excavators, their own backhoes, their own construction equipment. They could have cleared their own section, and then the whole prefecture could have been opened up by everybody doing their own little part. And the federal government, the provincial governments could have went in there and done the extra work too, right? But in 2016, during a same type of earthquake, they sent in 22,000 soldiers right away. There was helicopters landing everywhere. They were ferrying in supplies everywhere. They were bringing out the victims nonstop. It was like every earthquake, unbelievably coordinated, and they've been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they have a lot of earthquakes. And so they're very good at this, but not this time. And this time they're talking about earthquakes in the basements of buildings, not reactor 2, but in reactor 1. So they're not suggesting that the earthquake went under the plant was equal to upper 5 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 7. They're saying it's in a single building, which suggests reactor 1 fuel pools melted down. These reactors were offline since the year after Fukushima, but the fuel pools are just as volatile as a new reactor. Do they do this all the time on purpose to manipulate the weather? Can it be seen from space? So we're not hearing anything of Geiger counters. My Geiger counters here in Canada are trending up. I'm indoors, right? And so I can't find iodine 129. I can't find plutonium and I have an inspector. These are expensive Geiger counters. I can only find gamma. So I can't find plutonium. I can't find uranium 235. I can't find the majority of the harsh radioactive isotopes that we're seriously worried about, and I could barely find the gammas. These Geiger counters are not meant to uncover accidents. They're just meant to take your money and give you, a little iffy numbers. And we got very high numbers, and I'm going to come back over because we still got Shika headlines to get through to finish telling the story of Shika, because it keeps getting worse, don't it? Here we go again.
Yeah,
The
but it's
story just
important information, Dana. So I'm
yeah, it's
grateful that you take
incredible.
your time to be here in the weekend as well. That you need your rest as well. But
Oh well, I start my live shows again tomorrow night, show. So
that's what I mean.
it's all good. I'm more than happy. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm absolutely feel privileged to be here and talk to everybody.
No,
I'm
bless you.
very grateful to have the opportunity. So they admit a few days ago they got 100 aftershocks, and these aftershocks over 400 or over 3.5 on the Richter scale. There's significant shaking, and it's every 7 minutes for 13 days. The number of deaths in the Ishikawa evacuation center surprised him. So there's around 14 people died in the evacuation center. But this is one of the experts down there for accidents, saying he's confused why there's so many dead people in the evacuation center. Well, first off, they're living on a glass of water and a piece of bread, a slice of bread a day each. The elderly can't survive on that, right? And they got no heat. So there's other reasons. There really is good reasons for people to be dropping dead, unfortunately. But there's no reason for them not to have food. There's no reason for them not to have heat. There's no reason for them not to have cots, because we really actually do have helicopters on Earth. They actually really do exist. And the Japanese government has refused all offers from all countries to go in and help the victims. We've never, ever, ever in history have another instance that we can point to where that happened. So what happened? What is the catalyst to abandon all these victims for so long? They're still a victim. They're planning on moving 24,000 of them across Japan. But why did he wait so long? Now, the snow didn't show up until day 6. So they didn't even get there until day 7 and 8. So why didn't they go in? And your survival rate is based on 72 hours. So why didn't they go there in the first 72 hours and rescue people? Because that's your survival, the biggest survival. So again, they didn't want someone flying over it that would take pictures of the Shika nuclear power plant or that community and showing the actual damage. We have a sanitized version showed up from media that only showed us the crop top parts of the reactors, and I've never seen nothing like that before.
Yeah.
So this is what JIMA, but the radiation levels around the plant, this is Shika they're talking about, have not been monitored. But yet they showed you a picture of another place 60 kilometers away. Thousands of people are still being evacuated to safer places. Now this was day 11, and this was only one helicopter. This is the first time we've seen it, and it was evacuating 30 senior citizens from another area, but not on the same side as the Shika Peninsula or the Shika nuclear power plant. And I beat them up every day for 10 days. And on the 11th day, here's the helicopter, but it's just one. And we still have over 2,500 people still unaccounted for. Well, they're isolated communities where they say the roads are blocked up, we can't get to them. So, well, here's proof we got helicopters. Why doesn't a helicopter go in and drop off food and water and resources and medical and doctors and nurses? I'm pretty sure Japan could spare a few. Why did Japan Red Cross wait 10 days? Where is United Nations? Now, normally they will always toss something in to win over some favors, right? Why didn't they show up? Why didn't they make announcements? Why didn't they make any donations? Why is it Japan Red Cross, who should have been there on day 1, finally show up 10 days later, 11 days later almost? And they sent in 3,600 sets of beddings, earplugs, and face masks so you can block out the sunshine and get a little bit of rest. It's very difficult to get any rest when you got no food, no water, no electricity, no heat. The temperatures are dropping. You're completely abandoned. You don't know if your loved ones are alive. You don't know what your house is destroyed. This was a vibrant 1,000-year-old neighborhood burnt to the ground. So this was an unprecedented accident we've never seen in 1,000 years. An apparel company, thank goodness they exist because the Japanese government still hasn't done nothing, donated cold weather items to the quake hit areas. Underwear makers, 6,000 garments and shirts for women. They're ready to send, and they have available on a drop of a hat 100,000 down jackets and warm undergarments. Some already arrived in Nano and Suzu, which are on the other side of Shika, and the company will provide the goods and request the local authority. But the Japanese government should have done this, not some random corporation, right? So they're going to send 60,000 garments and shirts for women. And in Kanazawa City, I thought I had a map there. I guess I don't. Is about 50 miles south of Shika, which is the other opposite direction, right? So again, this doesn't. You got all that damage way up there. You got all the damage up in the other end of the peninsula with no damage at the Shika nuclear power plant. So you got a whole bunch of these little companies out there sending relief because they know people got nothing. And this is 11 days later. So you can see some of the damage in Wajima, which is the northern area of the peninsula. The tremors, which reached the highest level of 6 and 7 on the Japanese Shindo seismic intensity scale. 'cause I can't see them. Destroyed at least 14 houses, which is 35 miles south of Shika. We know north of Shika there's 4,500 homes in just one community, the Suzu community. And this is Wajima. Again, why wouldn't they show us a picture to go along with the words, right? Why did they show us this picture again? And these pictures are recycled now, we noticed. What about all the other communities? Why don't we get footage out of those other communities? So 72 hours are considered the critical window. So why didn't they send in helicopters and rescuers? Why didn't they let the Americans, the Chinese, the Indian uh, search and rescue teams that were going to fly in at their own cost with their own equipment, their own dogs, and rescue people? Why did they abandon the people for almost 10 days straight? Why were they left on a cup of water, not even a glass, one glass a day? Try drinking one glass of water a day. And this is the footage that we're seeing. There's people still trapped under buildings. There's people still, communities still not touched, and these people are walking around in Wajima, which none of this makes sense. The manager of the General Affairs Department of Suzu Town Hall said that while food supplies have finally started to arrive 11 days later, the lack of toilets, heating, and gasoline was a major problem. Yeah, because you're talking, imagine not getting a shower for 11 days, for instance. Only very few places had electricity, and there's no running water anywhere, and 80 to 90% of the buildings are not inhabitable. In other words, they're destroyed. And the mayor estimated 90% of the town was flattened, and that 90% of the town population were currently staying in shelters because their homes are destroyed. No U.S. boots on the ground. Why didn't the United States, why weren't they allowed to go in with their own equipment, their own helicopters? They had everything. They would have brought generators. They would have brought water filtration systems. They would have been able to desalinize salt water, seawater. They would have brought instant relief. And then people in that area that did have connections were reaching out to the Americans, asking them to please come help them. But the Americans said, well, we can't go in unless Japan says we can. Japan had yet to accept a week-old offer of U.S. military aid. This was day 10, not 7, but day 10. And the Americans, because we covered it, and I got the documentation, offered them help on the first day. Same as India, same as China, and we're still offering today. More than 1,000 aftershocks, as we know now it's well over 1,200, have rattled the region for more than a week. And they were calling them tremors instead of aftershocks. They were calling the main earthquake a tremor, which dropped over 10,000 houses. So they were downplaying the narrative significantly, symmetrically throughout the entire media. And because I aggregated everything I can get my hands on for the last 12, 13 days, Japan nuclear plant shaken beyond some safety estimates. Well, no, this is period beyond the safety estimates. According to the authorities and Hokukai Electric Power Company, the earthquake registered an upper 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7 in the basement of the Unit 1 reactor building. Not Unit 2, not the site, but just the reactor building. You can't have, again, see, the way you frame the narrative, they're suggesting someone is trying to warn you that reactor 1 fuel pools melted down. That's the only interpretation that I come away with, because why would you frame it so pacifically? You can't have shaking in just one building. It has to shake in all the buildings. And because it has to shake on a fault line itself on top of that, which we know is 150 kilometers long, and we know that the Earth rose up 13 feet in that 150 kilometers. And so the only real solution, again, of this equation is that fuel pools at Reactor 1 melted down at the Shika nuclear power plant. The earthquake registered an upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7, which is an 8 out of 10 of the Richter scale. And the reason that they use that scale and Taiwan also uses the same scale, if you look up Taiwan earthquakes, you'll see devastation. Skyscrapers tipped over, many of them. Earth tore apart. And you'll see the same thing in many Japan earthquakes. They use it to hide the damage when it happens to sensitive facilities like nuclear power plants. Nuclear has no right to exist. So to suggest it's in the basement is almost too much to bear for me. Of the Unit 1 reactor building, which at the top of it has two fuel pools, and each fuel pool has probably 5 reactor cores that are still hot and will come melt down on their own if they're not underwater the entire time. The minute they're exposed to oxygen, they melt down. Opera 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale is 7 in the basement. Because I'm having a hard time comprehending that statement, and the only takeaway I got on it is why would you focus in on a single building instead of the site unless it was a meltdown and somebody's trying to warn you of a meltdown. The Japanese government said a quake was caused by 45 seconds of movement along a 150-kilometer reverse fault line. And what they mean by reverse is the earth rose up on the northern side of Noto Peninsula. And then, well, how can you have it in the basement when it's 150 kilometers long, see? Okay, and so Opera 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7 will shake and rattle every building in Tokyo. So how can it only shake the basement of the number 1 reactor in Shika?
Yeah, it's bizarre, Dana, because you know what I also realized, that it's not only the earthquake but also these landslides. I mean, and the plates.
Yeah, good.
So that building is not damaged. I don't believe it for one bit, because there is also that maybe people do realize, but I realize even more. It's not only the earthquake, but it's also the slides. So that also
Right.
damages
Yeah.
buildings. I mean, and fundaments and basements. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
the earth rose up 13 feet. So
Mm,
look up at 13 feet. And then, because I've been covering it right from the get go,
mhm,
you know, um, I always take my time and very methodical when I'm trying to tell a story
mhm,
because it's nuclear. And so I don't have a right to rush anything. The proper way to do it is just take your time and flush everything out. Be very conscious of little details. And the details that we gathered up is over 1,200 aftershocks, and 400 of them were over 3.5. The places are already significantly damaged from the initial earthquake.
mhm,
You got over 1,200 landslides. And these landslides are incredible, but a lot of the roads could have been cleared in the local communities. They didn't even do that. They,
mhm,
like, on day 1, there was 1,000 landslides. On day 10, there was still over 1,000 landslides. You didn't clean them up. And
mhm,
then in the communities where all the pictures started coming out, you never seen any heavy equipment. You never seen any kind of activity. You never seen anybody trying to clear something. And they've been doing this for literally thousands of years, dealing with these attributes. But yet this time we don't see any activity. There's no helicopters bringing supplies
mhm,
out to the victims. So why would you leave very vulnerable populations to survive on a slice of bread and a cup of water a day to their own devices with no electricity, no food in the dead of winter, and with 1,000+ aftershocks and all kinds of landslides? When it's an easy remedy, you fill the helicopters up, you bring in the military, and you just flood the area with supplies, and they can sit out everything else until the weather breaks, and then you can clear out the area. So at least you would do that much. But there's other ways to do it. The helicopters, you've seen the helicopters, the military come into certain zones and they just push these big pallets out of the helicopters, and then the parachutes pop open and big Humvees land on the ground,
mhm,
and then they just break them open and drive away, right? But you can send all the supplies, so you don't even need to land. But I can see 1 or 2 communities where they couldn't maybe land because they're very tiny communities. They don't have much. All the earth was damaged, but not all the communities,
mhm.
right? Not every community.
I was even thinking, like, why not send then unmanned helicopters, or
Well, yeah. So normally, in this scenario, there's a lot of private people who owns helicopters, corporations, would have flown in their own supplies to get the jump on the government and get their name out there. And there's lots of major medias going helicopters. They would have brought in supplies. Well, the government couldn't get here yet, so we brought in some supplies, and they get a bunch of pictures and a bunch of hugs, and then they're on the Saturday night news, and everybody's, wow, you guys are heroes. Nothing. It got
Nothing.
zero. So the only thing that really adds up is they had a meltdown. And so they're avoiding at all costs anybody flying over that area and any idea of Geiger counters, because a lot of these military helicopters are going to have Geiger counters on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And here, Robstar, welcome by the way, Robstar. He also asked, when can we expect radar fallout video like Dana showed on Fukushima?
I don't think we can. I think that the nuclear industry is vehemently going to hide this nuclear meltdown like they done at Fukushima,
Mm.
um, because the nuclear industry cannot survive another nuclear meltdown anywhere on the planet.
So also NOAA
Japan,
is being paid to not show. Is that?
well, originally, because we've never seen four nuclear reactors and eight fuel pools melt down before,
Mm.
and so they covered that up right away. Where the models they showed were based on TEPCO's venting, not based on the actual nuclear meltdown. All the models I showed are based on venting, folks. And so imagine if the models were actually based on multiple reactor cores melting down. Well, you wouldn't be able to see planet Earth in the models, would you? And it would be sustained for a very long time. And so I don't think we're going to see any models. And let me bring up one of those pictures again
Mm-hmm.
of of the. I'm just going to come up to the full screen with everybody in a second. Okay, let's do that right now. In order to address that question, because that's such a great question, let's address that by reminding everybody what they've already done to us. So here's the media pretending they're in a building to your right, that pretending they're in a building to your left. So the media to the right are saying they're over 100 feet above the stump to your left, which is a lethal dose. You can never go near that. That's a lethal dose.
Are you
But they're
sharing?
claiming,
Are you sharing now, Dana? Because I don't
oh,
see.
it didn't share? Okay,
No, you
thank
did not
you.
share. No.
Oh, I didn't hit allow. Look at that. Good one. Thank you.
Exactly.
That's what we got to keep me honest. Okay, so to your right, you can see, now that's only a fraction of the media that came out in 2013 and pretended they were in the fuel pool of a reactor to your left, which doesn't exist. And the building to your left should have been razed all the way to the ground, but it wasn't because they put a so-called containment or cover over it that doesn't physically touch it. And then they claimed in 2013 and 14 they were in the fuel pools to the right. Now that's simply not true. So the fact that they done that and continue to tell that lie, now we're 12, almost 13 years down the road, they still continue to tell that lie. Now they claim that the building to the left never happened. The official story is it never happened, despite the fact that unequivocally that's Unit 1 in Fukushima blowing up, and that's different grabs of it blowing up. Now the little buildings you're seeing are 65 meters, 190-foot tall buildings. So the explosion to your bottom left-hand corner, that's the fuel pool. There's two of them at the top of the building that detonated, and that was the meltdown that caused the gas, the hydrogen gas, and the detonations. And so that burnt and lost its entire inventories in the fuel pools in just a matter of a short while. This is the bottom frame of the Kevlar sarcophagus that they put around reactor 1. So the top part to the bottom, that bottom piece down there, is that top piece right here. So that whole piece there is not visible in this piece. This is a 4-part piece. So it does kind of give you, when you look at this, hopefully that gives you some concept of how big this framing is. You can see a man down in the bottom of the video, and that gives you some context of how big these buildings really are. So that stump right there is taller, just the bottom piece now, is taller than reactor 3 and reactor 4 if you stack them on top of each other. So the bottom piece is 4 times higher than these two buildings stacked on top of each other. That went around reactor 1, which is the twin sister of these reactors. Each of these reactors had two fuel pools at the top of them, but just the reactor itself is equal to 100 Cheronobyls. Just the reactor itself is worse than all nuclear reactor meltdowns in history that we know about. There's 4 of these buildings. And Shika has those same attributes. So we're getting almost through the Shika stuff. Let's keep running into it. Unless, Ray, you got something you want to throw out there?
No, I'm listening
Okay.
with full attention. Everything for me is now very clear, and
Okay, great.
again, so grateful for all this information. Also to hear it live from you in my broadcast. So
Yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. Ishikawa earthquake response sees growing opposition scrutiny. And so the Diet, which is like a parliament or a congress, the opposition is saying the quake disrupted land access to the peninsula, knocked out the tiny airport serving the region, and for days capsized boats impeded the establishment of a sea route. Well, the sea route was gone because the earth rose up 13 feet and extended out 820 feet. So the harbors literally dried out permanently. You changed the dynamics of the coastline. When an earthquake of a similar magnitude hit the Kumamoto prefecture in 2016, that administration, Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated last year, thank goodness, and he was a terrible person who poisoned humanity with billions of pounds of radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland, is why I'm saying that. And it was a horrific crimes against humanity that he committed by doing that. Sent approximately 15,000 troops in the first 2 days, with a contingency reaching 26,000 members within a few more days. We're 13 days into this one, and we still got nothing in proximity to that, and we got about a dozen communities they still haven't managed to reach. And all they had to do, it's only 100 miles in any direction, and you can reach every community. So why aren't we seeing it? Government to aid Central Japan quake recovery with more subsidies. We see them now trying to play catch up. This is January 11th. On Thursday, 30 elderly residents requiring care were airlifted from Suzu, which is the opposite side of Shika. The Land Ministry said on Wednesday that it secured 6,500 public housing units nationwide for evacuees to move into immediately. And so why did we wait 11 days is absurd. And it's going to take many more days for them to pull something like this off. And they still haven't accomplished anything as of today. Around 2,500 residents remain cut off due to severe roads. This was yesterday. At least 3 faults ruptured in the 45 seconds in Japan's quake. It was actually 4. So let's just say 3 fault lines ruptured. These fault lines haven't ruptured for over 3,000 years. So this is something different, right? Fault response quake may stretch 150 kilometers. And this is what they mean by it. Look at this thing. This is what they mean by the fault, where it just ripped the earth apart and massive landslides. This is incredible pictures.
yeah, very impressive. And is it, by the way, can they even predict it?
Well, they knew it was on a fault, but they said, go ahead and build a nuclear plant here because it's a dormant fault. And it hasn't been active for thousands of years. And in our little time span, we managed to see it become active and devastating. And we assume there is a nuclear meltdown currently taking place and that they have covered this successfully up. But my scrutiny, if I can find any documentation to definitively show that, you can be sure I'm going to be out there swinging. The magnitude 7.6 quake, which was the Richter scale, measured a 7 on the Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. A 7 out of a 7 in the prefecture town of Shika. If you got a 7 out of a 7 earthquake, or a 10 out of a 10, whichever scale you want to use, because they're both the same, then what you're talking about is a catastrophic event. That's a 10 out of a 10 is a catastrophic event and shows a 7 out of a 7. And so Shika is the place where the nuclear power plant we're concerned about. We're also concerned about one in Niigata Prefecture. But this one in particular is surrounded in incredible mystery with all kinds of weird stuff we've never seen before taking place, where helicopters won't fly, where search and rescue is denied, where international countries that want to bring in dogs at their own expenses, equipment, helicopters at their own expenses, are refused absolutely unequivocally. We don't want you. And the excuse is it's too difficult to stage everything. And this is the opposite of reality, right? The more you got, the better it is. The more equipment showing up, the easier it is. And Japan government released a video of the tsunami surging up the river. These things come in at 400 miles per hour, and there's multiple tsunamis. So the first one comes in and ingresses far into the community. Then right behind it is another two or three at high speed, and you cannot escape it once it shows up. Moving central Japan quake evacuees a high priority. But it's not a high priority. This is on the 10th, and yesterday was the 12th, for instance. We still didn't see them moved. So they were abandoned for 10 days straight. They acknowledged them after 10 days, but they're still abandoned. The prefecture government believes many people may still be unable to report whether they are safe due to shortfalls in communication and severed traffic routes. Again, the shortfall in communication is as simple as flying in the military and sticking up communications because satellite actually exists. And the second one, for several traffic routes, then they can just fly people in and out with the big military helicopters. They can bring in endless medical teams, and they have them. They can bring in endless generators, food, water, blankets. They got apparel companies going to send in 100,000 Parkers. It defies any rationale unless there's a nuclear meltdown. The minute you put a nuclear meltdown to the equation, everything makes perfect sense, and that terrifies me. At least 3,000 people are not still reachable in Ishikawa Prefecture. So why can't they go in with a helicopter and drop off some supplies? They're not. They're not reachable. They refuse to be go in and reach them. They don't want anybody going into the area, which to me, nothing else makes sense unless it's a nuclear meltdown, damaging thousands of buildings. Okay, so that's it for Shika. Now we can come over and talk about Shika. I'll come back and we'll get Ray in. Stop hogging the screen time, Dana. Get Ray in for a little bit. It is your screen after all, Dana. And so now we got a pretty good picture, don't we, Ray? It's something happened, and it was a bit more than an earthquake. How's the questions going, folks? Now's a good time.
Well, you know your presentation helps just to how you said it, provoke at least that people will investigate and ask questions. And I think that's the meaning of this, and it's still too overwhelming for me to realize that even in 2011 there was already a meltdown, and now this, and I was thinking maybe I mean it's a lot of information, and I did see a lot of your live shows regularly, but about this Shika nuclear plant. Is the cooling system the same, like with the ocean water?
They're exactly the same as the Fukushima plant. They're boiling water reactors, and the fuel pools are at the top of the building. They're exact identical, 100% in every way, to the Fukushima nuclear power plants, and that the plants were shut down, but the fuel pools are still incredibly vulnerable. And the earthquake we're talking about is such strange connotations where they're saying they got a very high earthquake in the basement of a building. Not reactor 2, not the nuclear plant site, but just the basement of reactor 1.
Yeah, and to get an image about what is approximately the meters in between these two power plants, these plants. It's
They're
hard.
just 100 feet or something.
100
They're,
feet.
they're, say it's 300 feet. Say it's a football field, but it's not because I
Hmm.
showed you the pictures. Right, about
Yeah,
100 feet.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, but they're on a fault line. The reason you got the earthquake in the basement per se, which is not true. It's the whole site. The only reason you can have the earthquake there, you can't just have a little tiny fault line. So the fault line we know is 150 kilometers long,
Yeah.
and we know Shika, the community, which is tied basically onto the nuclear power plant, was a 7 out of a 7 on the Japan Shindu scale, right? Which is, you have to multiply Japan's numbers by 1.428 to get the Richter scale.
Hmm.
And when you look at the enormous damage, the enormous amount of aftershocks, the enormous amount of landslides, to suggest that they ain't the same would, it simply doesn't hold any water,
Yeah.
because obviously this is when you got 1,200 landslides and 1,200, it's actually around 1,400, and but the official number from a couple of days ago was 1,200. The official numbers of aftershocks was 1,240, but another 36 hours has gone by, so let's bump that up because we know there's still active shocks going on. We
Hmm.
know 400 are very high caliber in a very fragile environment. So, so how can I explain this? So you got all these landslides, you got all these aftershocks, you got a major earthquake that ripped the roads apart, dropped maybe 10,000 buildings and businesses right to the ground, turned them into matchsticks many times. Tsunamis. You have the Earth extending out 820 feet into the ocean, rose up for 85 kilometers on top of that, 820 feet and 13 feet up in the air. You have denial of all help to come in from different countries, which normally they welcome. In every other earthquake, they were like, "Yeah, come on in, right? Thank you so much."
Hmm.
And these people, like the American military, wanted to go in right away, and they're coming with equipment. They don't give a crap about anything. They are here to do business, and their helicopters will bring in heavy equipment. It'll roll off the helicopters, and it'll clear roads. And I mean, they'll bring in just endless food, endless water, endless generators. They'll just distribute it everywhere. It's magic how much equipment and energy and time they can punch in, or how much they can accomplish in 24 hours.
Hmm.
And we've seen 10 days of 30,000 people living on a slice of bread in shelters because their
Yeah.
homes are destroyed, living on a slice of bread, a cup of water,
Yeah.
not a glass of water,
It's just
no
unbelievable because
no
I
heat.
know also that, for example, the Indian people are very also great in rescuing in
Oh
mountains,
yeah,
and they
big,
are amazing.
big time. Good point. Thank you. They
So,
they they got too much practice.
mm,
And they were, come on, let us in, like, let us go, let's do it, let's get it on, right? And
hmm.
we'll bring doctors, we've got equipment, we'll bring our own, we are ready to go, sir, let us in there. And
So
Japan was
why
no.
refuse? Why refuse help?
Yeah, why didn't they let anybody fly over Shika?
Yeah.
Why don't we see any footage from Shika outside the sanitized top part? They cropped the old pictures and
Hmm.
showed us the top parts of the buildings. I can't even, that boggled my mind so much when I covered the story.
Hmm.
And after, like, when I seen it originally, I blew up laughing, right? Because here was these crop pictures of the top of the buildings, and what are you doing? They're
Yeah.
desperate. They're desperate. And
And
the horrifying part, cut you off, Ray. The horrifying part of all this is I'm the only person on the entire planet that is asking this question. What's going on? And you, obviously, right? But that's, you kind of lose faith in humanity when you see this happening, right? Where's all the other bloggers?
yeah, where
Where's all
yeah.
the anti-nuclear brigades too, right? Where's the beyond nuclear? Where's Greenpeace? Where's the concern?
Well,
Where's
that's
the
that's that's
academics?
that's interesting
Yeah,
because I was
yeah.
thinking about Greenpeace, Greenpeace. I think that I'm a bit
Greenpeace. Yeah.
fulfilled, but yeah, there are a lot of other organizations who can at
Yeah.
least. I hope that people who will watch this live stream, and you specifically with your knowledge and what you investigated, that people will maybe investigate for themselves and find out, hey, there's something not right here. By the way, there is some. I did see some questions come by. Is that okay for you? Do you still have energy for that?
Oh, I do so. Yeah. Oh.
I saw something come by, but you can read it, of course, as well. Delvertje says or asks, could this be caused by harp? So I think she
Well, could,
means.
could have harp caused some of these events? Yeah, of course it could. Yeah. I don't. Well, this was a fault line that ruptured for 150 miles,
Mm,
and so we're talking about tectonic plates basically going, "Ugh." And so we're talking about an enormous amount of energy that would cause all kinds of other issues, right? But again, there's many new technologies that we're not allowed to talk about, and so I can't talk about it because you're streaming to YouTube and that. And I know some of these are sanitized technologies where I've actually had um, issues with before, so I'm not going to take a chance on your channel.
mm, mm-hmm.
What would happen to the nuclear power plant, the global resistance, after an ICBM attack that does not hit them directly, but would the electric magnetic pulse (EMP) damage the emergency power supplies as well? Like if you had a carry-on event from the sun, where the sun affected the grids, all nuclear power plants worldwide will melt down at the same time because it will take out all the necessary functions. All nuclear power plants, by the way, are dependent on external power. They can't run on their own power, and generators only meant to last around 8 hours. So most nuclear power plants only have fuel on site for about 8 hours, because that's not really. And but these generators are huge generators. They generally need a day's advance to fire these things up. And so if you're going to melt down, you don't get water in about 50 minutes. It melts down. A running reactor can needs 4,500 tons, 4,500 pickup trucks of water a minute, for instance, one way to look at it, or 1 million gallons a minute. It's a mind-boggling a number, really.
Mm,
So imagine you got to take the keys and organize the keys for 4,500 trucks. And so if you just got the car keys for 4,500 trucks, that's like a mind-numbing amount of keys to keep control of the track, right? And pass out. You can't pass out 4,500 keys in a minute. You need to do that. You need to fill up 4,500 one-ton trucks with water every minute, 1,440 minutes a day. So um, you're talking about like so much energy in order to cool the reactors every minute. They're dependent 100% of the times on external power, like gas, oil, and coal plants are typically dedicated to the nuclear site. They're built before the nuclear power plant, and they'll feed the nuclear plant to build it because these are enormous undertakings. And like the big plant they're building Sizewell in the United Kingdom, for instance, there's enough cement to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome, just in one building. It's the biggest construction site in human history. And that the resources we're talking about, it's enormous. You're talking about 9,000 people a day working on this site. So think about how much electricity you actually need just to build a site. You need the same generations just to run the pumps, because each reactor, there's going to be multiple reactors on the site, is going to need 1 billion gallons a day. So try your garden hose, or like your garden hose will do about 140 tons a day, 24 hours a day, 30 psi, a 3/8 inch garden hose. These reactors need 4,500 tons every minute, but your garden hose can only do 140 tons a day. So we're talking about an enormous amount of electricity just for that facet. But there's so many other things going on. There's over 1 million pieces of equipment on these sites, very complicated sites.
mm-hmm.
They shouldn't exist. And the sites are all about the nuclear fuel cycle. After 18 months of nuclear fuel cycle, when you take the fuel out, you can now get enough plutonium out of it to make nuclear weapons. It's producing plutonium on a prolific amount at this stage, and it'll do that indefinitely, long past the human experience on this planet. And so, back to Barry's or the global resistance, what would happen to a nuclear power plant after an ICBM attack? Like we've seen in the Ukraine, all you got to do is cut external power, and you threaten the plant to melt down. The generators can only keep up with a little bit. They're not meant to go more than 8 hours, basically. And cold shutdown takes quite a few days for that to happen. So they're going to melt down. Once the chain reaction starts, you can't switch it off because the lethal doses, you can't go in there physically do something. And there's been many, many nuclear accidents that they have managed to cover up over the years. I wanted to just run you over. I'm going to come up to share the screen again for a few minutes. And I'm going to take you over to some information. Now we're just going to run through some headlines of Fukushima. And I want you to not try to absorb each story per se, but absorb the big picture I'm about to give to you. So these are some headlines after Fukushima. Fukushima nuclear report was so shocking we decided to treat it as, this is the government, as if it didn't exist. They pretended the meltdown didn't exist. Think about how frightening it is that you would suggest something like that. The radiation data from Seattle, United States, may be withheld by the government for national security purposes because people would demand that it close down all the nuclear power plants in the country, for instance, and that they would have abandoned Seattle and Washington if the truth came out. And that another study showed the xenon-133 in Washington, a radioactive fallout, just that particular isotope, 450,000 times. These are catastrophic to all species and humans. You should never go back into that land. But you're talking about the whole country at 450,000 times above detection levels, and it persisted for weeks after Fukushima. Well, not that. It never goes away because all the other isotopes are there. Very high concentration of hot particles. A single hot particle in your body is catastrophic to your body. And everything from a nuclear meltdown is a hot particle, including plutonium and americium. So we just had xenon, now we got plutonium, now we got americium. Map shows Fukushima fallout in the United States from Fukushima. The doses in the Northeast and the Great Lakes, which is central, the continent, is equal to the West Coast. So these are catastrophic numbers. And that such a tiny amount as 11 atoms per kilogram, and a Becquerel, BQ, is the pulse of energy every second. So the atoms are pulsing energy every second, and maybe for millions of years. So 11 becquerels a kilogram, you can put 200 million atoms rather, on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So how are you going to distinguish 11 if you can't see 200 million atoms on the head of a needle? I think earlier I might have said 200,000, but that happens sometimes. Very unusual for me to make that mistake, but I did. I remember it distinctly. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. In Japan's limit, they claim, is 100 becquerels a kilogram, 100 atoms a kilogram. So you're going to have irreversible heart damage in every child. And this is what we're basically seeing starting to manifest worldwide. Radioactive materials like cesium, which is just one of 1,000 fission products we need to worry about, are brought back to the surface soil each year by plant growth and radioactive pollination. And so the pollinators, which are the most important species we actually have on the planet, are being destroyed by radioactive pollen. And we know in Japan the radioactive pollen is at around 4,000 per cubic meter of air. So the atoms get in your body, they're like explosions going off in your cells, blowing holes in your chromosomes, your DNA, every second. It never goes away. Radiation levels of several dozens of sieverts. Now 3 sieverts, that terminology, that's a lethal dose for a human in a very short exposure. So the only people that are working at Fukushima are the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. and no nuclear scientists, no academics, no nuclear corporations, no nuclear students or universities, no experts are there. Only the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. This is Miko Kaku, a famous physicist from California, well known on major Western medias. Human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores. It was 4, and then it was 8 fuel pools. And International Atomic Energy Agency admitted, which is the IAEA, which is United Nations, there is no such thing as a safe level of radiation. And that their standards at the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has no authority, not a regulatory agency, they're a bunch of bullies from 195 militaries, which is known as UN. Their standards are based on natural stuff, not based on anthropogenic man-made radiation. That should make everybody sick to their guts. So the standards the International Atomic Energy Agency are throwing around are not based on man-made. And that's how they're getting away with poisoning humanity. By the way, it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and parliaments don't have the authority to make it illegal. They can make it illegal to poison you with 3,000 chemicals, but they can't make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the nuclear regulatory agencies has the authority, and they're appointed by each government, each administration. They're new ones. And none of them have ever made it illegal to poison you. If they did, they wouldn't be able to kill you in your hospitals. Doomsday-like radiation release of fire in the pool at Unit 4. Now, I showed you pictures of 4 different medias pretending they were in the fuel pool. It would be a global catastrophe. Doomsday-like radiation. And I'm going to bring that to context right after this. Japan's worst-case scenario assumes significant public exposure by March the 2nd, the day after, because Reactor 1 exploded. Significant public exposure. Not just cancer, but how low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. Think about that, what's going on now. How you got lung problems, and respiratory, pituitary, and thyroid, and adrenaline. And down the road, you see Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome skyrocket. That's typical of radioactive poisoning. Major U.S. paper, time to quit nuclear power altogether, threatens the very existence of human civilization. And they have every right to say that and put it in those connotations. It's the duty of the scientific community to reduce the public's fear and anxiety about radiation. Well, the idea of a scientific community is to educate you, not misrepresent and deceive and downplay. That's absolutely not true. And so here's another isotope study. So I showed you plutonium, neptunium, cesium-137, xenon-133, and this is the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs they're actually talking about here. This is a phenomenon they actually knew about in the 50s from ocean nuclear weapons testing that I call a nuclear war. It's the same nuclear weapon and it's the same radioactive fallout. And some of these nuclear bombs, like the Soviet Union biggest bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki, because Hiroshima was the uranium bomb, Nagasaki was the plutonium bomb. So these were equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. 3,800 nuclear weapons the size of the 15 kiloton Nagasaki bombs going off at one time. Sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, by the way, these are all hot particles. And what happens is the sulfur is separated and becomes like a spherical ball, like a soccer ball. And then it ingests uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, blah, blah, blah. Isotopes, they become super hot particles. They're very mobile. They don't need a jet stream to traverse continents. And they're very dangerous. Just one of them in your body will trigger a vicious autoimmune defense against it, where you'll saturate that area every second of your life for the rest of your life with white blood cells. Those white blood cells, of course, has to displace a red blood cell. in order to exist. So now you're moving red blood cells out of the way to produce the white blood cells. And that means you have less nutrition, less oxygen, because that's what the red blood cells carry. So as you bioaccumulate this stuff, and because it never goes away, your body has to attack it relentlessly for the rest of your life. And every bit of damage, every second, from the pulse of energy from each of these atoms has to be dealt with by your immune system. So your immune system becomes overwhelmed. Fukushima release was so great the radioactive aerosols in Washington were 100,000 times normal. The radiation iodine levels in the United States was well above the permitted level in the drinking water, which meant you should have abandoned your communities there. Is iodine 131 killing babies in Philadelphia? Death rates up 50% in infant mortality since the radiation levels spiked in the tap water. So all of these are acknowledging it has showed up. But what now they're claiming these two buildings didn't melt down, for instance. They didn't have any kind of releases, and that the releases were equal to 3 grams of sugar. This is madness to suggest anything like that, but that's now the International Atomic Energy Agency cooked up the story, and all the media and universities are regurgitating that narrative. And we are just, that is simply unconscionable that these people are in a position to do something like that to humanity and the 8 million species. UN committee chairman studying Fukushima radiation impact, we wouldn't expect to see health effects in children, workers, or anyone else. Well, if you don't expect to see any effects after 4 nuclear meltdowns, then you should be dissolved. You shouldn't exist because you don't really have a job. Because if the worst case scenario is not harmful, then why do you exist in the United Nations? See? Leading director in Japan, nuclear power generation, only invention that may destroy the future of human beings. And as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will leak out about Fukushima. Okay, so with all of that in mind, I got to take you to my research expeditions. As you can see, there's not very many to get through. I launched after Fukushima, and I still use this boat all the time, research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. There's 27,000 islands. You're right across from Japan. This is where the plumber's going to land first. And there's my trusty sidekick, Zoe. And she passed away on a bird expedition, bless her heart. And that was where she wanted to be. Trust me, that was her favorite spot out on the ocean. And so she was the only color on any of the beaches. I'm going to show you in a minute. So the map to the left was the tsunami map from NOAA, the American government, and the map to the right is the radioactive dispersion in the ocean from NOAA. So the mainstream media and nuclear industry promoted the picture to your left, and when you said, oh my God, this is terrible, because they said it was radiation, they mocked you then in the comment sections and everywhere else and said, hey, stupid, that's the tsunami. But meanwhile, they hid this one to your right away from you, which was the actual NOAA's model of cesium-137 dispersal. That's me in my healthier days, and that's 2 of the little skiffs that I use for my research even today. And the sailboat would tow the boats all around those 27,000 islands. And I would go for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. And this is a model from Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Alaska. And I took my time and meandered through the 27,000 islands, through the choke points where the ocean has to come through to reach the interior islands. And the pictures to your right are the same places as the picture to your left. There should be up to 7,000 highly visible species in the tidal zones. And you can see the vibrant, beautiful colors to your left are now exterminated. You'll never take that picture again due to Fukushima. And look at this incredible diversity to your left. The beaches are actually made from the shells. So the shells break down into fine particulate sand. And every island of the 27,000 islands is surrounded by multiple beaches. The beaches are still there, and they're made from the shellfish breaking down and turning into sand. But you won't find those shells on the beaches. They're actually gone too, post-Fukushima. And that's incredible. I mean, that is incredible that you got beaches made of shells, but there's no shells on the beaches. It's absurd. And you can see the diversity to your left, and then you can see there's nothing left, only a couple of algae on the right. There should be 700 algae. There should be 84 species of starfish. There should be 74 species of sea anemones. And that's what you're looking at right there, those sea anemones, those round circles. There should be 74 species of them. Each species comes in multiple vibrant colors. The starfish are the same thing. There should be about 74, 76 species. And each species would come in multiple vibrant colors. And to the right, you can see the same places. Now, the whole coastline would look like that to your left. And I went there year after year for 6 years, 4 to 5 months, even 6 months at sometimes, on the ocean without coming home, in desperation looking for an oasis. And it does not exist. We wiped them out. They were wiped out. And the only catalyst that we have was Fukushima. And so these pictures to your left, you'll never take these pictures again. This incredible beauty, and now it's just a absolute wasteland. And in fact, if you shipwrecked there pre-Fukushima, you could live forever and have tons of food, lots of protein. If you shipwreck there now, you'll starve to death. There's no way to survive more than a couple of days. There's no food left. Now, I used to be a commercial diver, and I dove this coast for many, many years. And the species to your left used to really bother me because when you touched down, it was very difficult not to be stepping on other creatures. And so that would bother you because you don't want to squat a bunch of creatures. And at nighttime, because I would stay on the ocean for 100 days at a time, and at the end of the day, you would put up a beach line. But you would wait until high tide because if you tried to walk up the beach, you would kill all kinds of creatures, but it was very slippery. It was very difficult to walk up the picture to your left versus the picture to the right, where there's no species left. And this is a prime example, really, of the coastline to your left. That's really a great picture of what the coastline should look like. And as you can see, it would be very difficult to get up to the high tide line from low tide without falling and hurting yourself. So you would wait for high tide, go in a little skiff and put up your beach line on a tree so you wouldn't drag anchor at night. And that's the idea. You put out an anchor, but a beach line also so your boat doesn't swing around and drag anchor. Because you're talking about a 19-foot tide exchange. And what that means is your boat, as the tide's rising, could raise the anchor or move it. And then while you're sleeping, you can drag it in up on the rocks. Now there's no worries about slipping and falling down. And it's so strange to see the shorelines to your right empty. It's just mind-boggling that could happen. And this happened post-Fukushima. This is an extinction level event. Okay, so we're coming back over. And how we doing, Ray, for time? As I know we're getting there.
Well, it is good that this information all comes out, and when I see all these pictures again. By the way, there were in the previous subject there was still some conversation going on, but maybe you saw it about EMP and.
Yeah, we touched on that one, I think. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I could not read it exactly, but I thought maybe was there still a question. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see what the global resistance is
Yeah.
on. But go ahead. Yeah.
Is that okay to answer
Yeah.
that one still?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, you can read it as well.
Which one?
Which one? Could anybody survive 700 nuclear power plants having a meltdown after thermonuclear world
No.
war
No.
or a major solar storm?
That'll exterminate everything, and bacteria, fungus included. Nothing will survive it.
Mm,
It'll eradicate everything with replicating cells. Let's put it that way.
yeah. By the
Because they have
way,
no defense. Yeah. Go
mm,
ahead.
by the way, I was pretty impressed by how I started to realize that it's not illegal to have nuclear energy. That
Not
started
illegal to
and
poison you with radiation. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation.
that's what I mean. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
also
No.
am
I was
fulfilled.
just clarifying.
Yeah,
No, it's
yeah.
good. No,
I'm,
no, no.
I'm, I'm
It's
amazed.
a difficult subject, right?
Yeah, it
And
is.
if you don't come across someone like me, if you don't come across my documentation, you're not going to work it out on your own. You're
Mm,
simply not going to do it. And that's the problem. They know it. It's structured that way, so you can't work it out on your own.
mm,
And the only information you're going to find is the same propaganda. No matter which institution you go to, they're going to feed you the exact same propaganda.
mm,
And um, the thing with what I do is, if I make a simple Freudian slip, they'll chop that out. And if I make enough of them, they'll string them together and they'll come out and say Dana's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And it'll be completely out of context. And that if you go and you look me up, you'll find horrific, horrific things said about me.
I
But if you
did.
want,
I did
yeah,
try. I
it's
did try.
horrifying.
I saw the most,
It's
yeah,
horrific.
awful
Yeah,
things, the
it's
negative
like
things.
awful is not the word. I don't think it's
Mm,
just horrifying.
mm,
And I got no choice. And those people should realize my personality. That when you do something like that to me, I'm never going to go away.
mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
making a. I got nowhere else to go. You separated everybody away from me by all these awful lies, and the only thing I got left in my life is to kick the daylights out of the nuclear industry for the rest of my life.
Mm,
And obviously, at the pace that I set, that's what's going on, right?
mm,
It backfired because normally they'll drive people away with these horrific lies, right? But what it done to me was showed absolute desperation and this bully mentality, this arrogance, this hubris,
mm,
that I said to myself, you know what? I might have given up 5 years ago because it's a ridiculous amount of work that I do every single day.
mm,
It's ridiculous,
yeah.
and now I don't know how to do anything else. That's all I know how to do now, is
Yeah.
because they made it so that I couldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, and can I ask how safe are you feeling there at the coast? Because you're, I mean, if that plume, if
Yeah.
that, I mean, you
Well,
already told that in Europe it could have been hit already yesterday, also in the Netherlands, if it would have been
if
a
it melted
meltdown.
down, yeah.
But how are you coping, or how are you? Yeah, are you
Well,
living there in the right spot, or I mean, not exactly the best
well,
spot?
I'm on the other side of the continent,
Uh huh.
but because I
Oh
used to be
yeah.
on the west coast, right now
Yeah.
I'm on the east coast of
Mhm.
Canada.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter where I'm to on the
Mhm.
planet, you're still going to get an awful amount of radioactive fallout.
Yeah.
I'm on an island out in the Atlantic Ocean, so I'm a little bit better situated than most people.
Mhm.
Because most people, if you're on the continent, you got the radioactive fallout washing down through the continent towards the coastlines, whereas I'm on an island.
Mhm.
And I'm on an island, unfortunately. Uh, I'm on the planet, unfortunately. So I
Mhm.
can't escape it. You
No.
can't escape
No
it.
one. Yeah.
But we could, like, if we were honest, we wouldn't have to escape it per se. They would have sent in all kinds of equipment to deal with it. And instead, what they decided to do was cover it up and pretend it didn't happen.
Mhm.
And some of the headlines I gave you earlier, it really clarifies. Like after Fukushima, they said people 60 and older should be prepared to die at the Fukushima plant. So if your power plant breaks down, people 60 or older should be prepared to die at the plant. Well, shouldn't we sacrifice all the nuclear scientists first? And all the universities, nuclear universities, shouldn't we sacrifice all those students first, for instance? So when they talk about 60 and older should be prepared to die, they're not talking about anybody in the nuclear industry. They're talking about the most vulnerable of society. This is what Japan was doing too. And they kidnapped and shanghaied all the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. And they disposed of them like paper towels. Literally treated them like used paper towels. And they were thrown away after 2 days. They
Mhm.
were given promises of $3,000 an hour to go into certain zones. If you're homeless and you got a job and he's got $3,000 and he gives it to you, you puts it in your pocket and he says, I want you to go over there and pick up that bunch of tools. You go over there, then you fall down, you drop dead. And so now they know better than to send somebody over in that zone for a while till the remote control bulldozers can go in. And then when they finally retrieve the body, they're just going to incinerate it.
Mhm.
We know of uh, 800 urns of ashes of the homeless in just one spot alone. Now, we also know that the fuel from the reactor cores and the fuel pools in some of the reactors were tossed right out of the buildings at very high velocity and landed all over the site. So there's no way you're going to get a nuclear scientist. And I've produced TEPCO, which is the operator of the site, which shouldn't exist. And the reason they exist is so you blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry, who's actually responsible.
Mhm.
Because TEPCO can just go bankrupt, and all of a sudden, the nuclear industry haven't got a problem no more. But they're the ones that should take the blame, obviously, right? And so you got all these people going there, but they're not experts. We've never seen a video of a nuclear expert at Fukushima plant.
No.
Almost 13 years later. And then now we got this event in Shika, and we got overwhelming evidence that something catastrophic has happened.
Mhm.
And when you got them coming up and telling you that there's an earthquake in the basement of Reactor 1, instead of the earthquake went under the nuclear plant site itself, the fault line, like it did,
Mhm.
where all the communities, the Shika community was a 7 out of a 7. You had a huge earthquake at the site, but only in a basement and only of a single reactor building. They're telling you it melted down. That's telling you it melted down.
Mhm.
And until I see evidence that can disprove it, I got no choice but to assume it melted down.
Yeah, I
The,
really am wondering while all hearing this how this is on top of that what happened in 2011. And I was always against nuclear energy. I'm not a scientist, but I always was strictly against it because it's man-made and it's dangerous if it gets loose, etc. I mean, I'm totally against it, but I was wondering as well when
yeah.
you were talking about these species, when and how are we going? What's the next step in that we are maybe noticing it? Because, for example, with the food chain, like with the fish and everything, what you also showed, how I mean that also the fishermen will notice that it's getting less and less. And
Oh, they are.
maybe you
Right, yeah,
understand
good
my
points.
question. When are we
Okay,
going?
so, well, we're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've been seeing it dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many. I generally, every 2 or 3 weeks, I'll do a update on species.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do it, and they're usually a 3 or 4 hour video. And what I'll do is, I usually do it on the last show of the week. So people got a couple of days to get through it because it's a lot of documentation.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the gray, like, so there's a lot of people will talk about pilot whales and how pilot whales they'll go up on the beaches in large groups and it's normal and all this other thing. It's actually not. But it's not just the pilot whales that we see dying in mass. We have a mortality event for gray whales. We have a mass mortality event for humpback whales. We have a mass mortality event for fin whales. We have a mass mortality event for beak whales.
Mm-hmm.
And we got over 10,000 gray whales that have washed up dead since 2016, but almost every one of them are emaciated. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way they can go from 12 inches of blubber to 3 inches of blubber is if there's no phytoplankton in the ocean.
Is it,
And
by the way, also that, for example, the ice bears, they emaciated, that it is also,
3,000 polar bears
yeah,
emaciated in the Arctic. That
yeah,
was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a story came out
mm-hmm,
where all the polar bears in this area, it was around 3,000 of them, were emaciated. And some of the videos are just disturbing to watch. There was one
mm-hmm,
polar bear that swam for 400 kilometers looking for food. It finally found a spot where there was some seals, and that polar bear had done the longest dive and the deepest dive, and died about a week and a half later in desperation to get some food.
oh, gee,
What happened to the food chain was the first thing we'd done with the radioactive fallout, because it covered the entire planet
mm-hmm,
and the surface of all the fresh and ocean waters, it killed the phytoplankton because the phytoplankton lives at the surface. The phytoplankton is the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, and the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. And the basis of the food chain means it's it feeds all the other species, and the species feeds the next species. Those species feeds the next species. Eventually, they feed the herring and the anchovies and the squids and the sardines and the krill and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once you start destroying the basis of the food chain, you see that breaking of the food chain. Then it manifests in many different ways. And so it's very subtle, for instance. You don't really, for the average person, they have no way, because they don't understand how big and the diversity of the food chain looks like. So it goes this way. I'm on the East Coast. Now, I showed you pictures of the Pacific Ocean coastline. The food chain is destroyed, right? There is no ecosystem anymore. It's completely destroyed. And so all the migratory birds that would normally come along that coastline have no food resources. And so in 2015, 2016, there was a million plus common murres, and they dive 600 feet all day long. They feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and stuff like that. But also at the same time was the Cassini auklets, and they feed on microscopic animals. So you had millions of them showed up dead, emaciated, and millions of common murres showed up emaciated. So you had two different species that feed on two different spectrums of the food chain showing up at the same time in millions emaciated. So the food chain was broken. But
Mm-hmm.
we've now seen that on the East Coast too.
Yeah.
And now here we're on to, on the East Coast of Canada, we have the biggest migratory run of seabirds worldwide. We get around 46 million migratory birds come through here each year from spring to November. Now I'm doing bird studies last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. They didn't show up. So if 46 million birds show up somewhere else, that's going to make a news, right? It didn't make the news because they disappeared. Now officially they're not acknowledging that. And another part of the studies I do to study the birds is I study insects in the forest. Now the typical acre of forest would have a half a million spiders into it, many different species, but a half a million. So typically, when I'm looking for insects, I'm going to study spider webs because the spider webs will tell me what species of insects live in that forest. And so every forest is micro ecosystems, and it's a quick way to find what species I can expect to find that night or the next day in the forest. I couldn't find the spider webs in the forest. And so spiders bioaccumulate radiation 1,000 times, 1,000% more than the other species because they liquefy other insects. And so when they drink the liquefied of the other insects, they bioaccumulate the radiation. And because they produce many generations in a short period of time, they will generally disappear pretty quickly. They're what you call keystone species. And so are mosquitoes. Mosquitoes feed frogs, they feed fish, they feed trout, they feed all kinds of little insect eating birds. And so the majority of the little birds we're seeing are seed eaters, not insect eaters. And the majority of the insect eating nest colonies that we see set up have all failed. They have birds, but they abandon them. And so right now, all I can find on the East Coast is three species of marine birds, and they were uh, one species doesn't belong here, which is known as a cormorant. The other one is a residential known as a seagull. And the other one is the kittiwakes, also known as the tickalass here. And they're like a small seagull. And they lay their eggs in the open on the edge of a cliff. So you can literally go along in your speedboat and see how many eggs in the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And also the puffins. Their colonies all failed on the East Coast this year. And they laid their second set of eggs later in the year, but they failed too. And so I was studying this group on these couple of islands out here because that's all that's there. And I couldn't figure out where they were feeding because they weren't feeding in the ocean. And on a beautiful summer's day, where the oceans are like a sheet of glass, there was no fish jumping, there was no birds diving, there was no feeding going on. I've never heard tell of that. The cliffs which have sustained millions of generations, are normally um, all winter included will be stained with the excrements of the birds because they nest and raise their youngs and they just poop off the side of their nest, right? And that runs down the cliff and that stains the cliff white. And so when I'm out on the boat, you would see all the white stains and you go over and document the birds. We didn't find that anywhere on the coastline. So in order for that to disappear, that takes several years for that staining to finally go away because it's been there for millions of years, millions of generations. So, like for yourself, you're not paying attention. I would imagine you're not doing tallies, for instance, right? And so, what I've been noticing and frightening me is we have thousands of freshwater ponds here, and we're not seeing any migratory birds in the ponds, which is that's the nursery for a lot of the species is
Mm-hmm.
freshwater ponds for ducks and mallards and stuff like that and loons. And then the coastline for many species, shearwaters and kittiwakes and albatrosses and shearwaters. There's so many species you can barely wrap your mind around it. The Arctic turds, just unbelievable diversity. And I found only three species, and these were the residential species. And I couldn't figure out how they were, and their colonies were only a 5 to 7% survival rates for the hatchlings and the fledglings. And I couldn't figure out where they were getting food to. It turns out there's a crab fishery plant about 5 miles by the bird, but around the peninsula from where I was doing the research. And when I finally went around there, this is where I found all the birds that were feeding on the stuff coming out of the fish plant from the deep sea crab fishery. And we just noticed last year, not noticed, but it was just documented last year, that 10 billion snow crabs disappeared. So snow crabs, they're bottom feeders. They don't swim or anything like that. So a lot of the radiation sinks down to the bottom, and they feed on the radioactive carcasses of the phytoplankton or anything else, and they got poisoned and stopped reproducing. It took several generations before that started to manifest, but then it once it reached a certain crescendo, now they disappeared. That's the end of that. And as I showed you the pictures, folks, of the coastline, those species, I went back 6 years in a row because I felt the species would start to recover. They didn't. It got worse until there was nothing left. So then we moved the operation to the East Coast, and that's where we're currently at right now. We're seeing the same things here as we've seen on the West Coast. But the West Coast was very hot when I was there, and the best thing I could do for my health was to get off of that coast. Unfortunately, it was too late. And so in February last year, I had 3 heart attacks and 7 stents put in. And I have had a host of other problems since then. But that's the most stints that anybody's ever had put in this province is 7.
That's
And
an
so,
incredible lot. I mean, yeah.
so somebody decided I was worthy to keep around,
Mm.
and that the local doctors weren't allowed to operate on me in the city. They said, "Well, you're CIA, FBI, or something." I said, "No, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, we can't operate you, but there's a team just landed at the airport. They're going to be here just about an hour ago. They're going to be here in about 15 minutes, and they're going to do the surgery on you. You're going to be in really good hands." And I was like, "Well, first off, I'm not FBI and I'm not CIA, and nowhere near it." And
You had some
and
angels who took care of
it,
you, for
this
sure.
team this team flew in, done the surgery on me, and then flew out again.
Mm.
That's never happened before. They said they've
Mm.
never seen. Every nurse there came in and had a look at me to see who the hell I was. So somebody said, "Hey, keep this one around.
Mm.
He's a lot of fun."
Yeah, a lot of
And
knowledge. Yeah, people wish you all
thank you,
also the
everybody.
best. Like Delvertje says, Dana is a medical miracle. By the way, Dana, I love our conversation, but I noticed
What?
myself it's 10 to 11.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
I'm starting. I already started to be a bit fulfilled, but I
Bless
love
your
to
heart.
hear you
You're not
talking.
you're
But
not
maybe
yawning yet, so
no, no, but I can really keep it
I'm waiting for it.
also
I don't
with him,
blame you.
I am not not.
Oh, we've been going too long.
No, not too long. Not too long.
No, we're going.
But
That's
that's
just
what.
about the right amount of time. I
That's
actually don't have anything else to add, so go ahead,
okay.
Ray.
Well, maybe it's yeah. Then it's the full circle round. But
It's hilarious when you think about it. It's so sad. It's such a tough subject, right? It's such a sad
it
subject.
is amazing because I was when I started to. I said it often in the live streams. Like when the first time I came across you, I thought like, who is that man with that large, well, a great scenery? And I felt like, why is that information not entering? That was my first thoughts. Like, that's ridiculous because I know a bit about nuclear energy. I know a bit about atoms. I know the basics. So I
Yeah.
really was thinking, like, how is it possible that I cannot let it in? And then with repetition and over, and then
It is, isn't it? It's very.
it is, but it is a hard matter. It is, yeah, it is for me. I hard to, yeah, really, yeah. I had to let it repeat, and I learn a lot. I learn
It's
a
how
lot.
once it sinks in, then you can extrapolate on your own.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
really can.
yeah.
And it does take. I generally my consensus was that it takes 5 or 6 episodes
Mhm.
of concentration, and it's just it doesn't work for everybody. And I generally, you know me, I provide a ridiculous amount of documentation for the most part
Mhm.
because then people it makes sense to people better that way. I hope, and pictures and schematics and actual documentation so to back up my assertions. So everything I do is based on facts, and I always provide the documentation when it's appropriate.
Mhm.
So there can be no way to misinterpret it, and that's the only way to educate people. I run an educational program. So I'm not per se the anti-nuclear activist, despite the fact I guess that's what I am. I'm an educator that's trying to get everybody up to speed, so you can't be hoodwinked anymore, and so that
Mhm.
you can, when the time comes, that you can educate those around you too. When the world finally has an open mind, and that day is coming. It's
Oh, I'm
100%
sure.
coming.
I think a lot of things are coming together in this as well. I see 2024 as maybe as a kind of biggest awakening that people start to really. I don't like the word wake
Yeah,
up, but more.
I
I
use it all
think
the time. Yeah.
2024 will be a very interesting year, and that's my feeling about it. And by the
Mhm.
way, I see so many wonderful comments. Thank you so
Yeah.
much,
Thank
Global
you, everybody.
Existence, Delvertje, Sunbeam Sting. I saw also Jane come by on YouTube, and I could not. Immediately respond because I want to fully concentrate on Dana's story, of
I
course.
appreciate it. Yeah,
But it's
talking about the Shika, and
yeah, and yeah,
if we get confirmation, Ray, I'll reach out to you, and we'll have to put out a special episode
yeah. Let's
for your viewers
mm-hmm,
and
yeah,
get that conversation started. We got unequivocal, unassailable documentation.
yeah.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah.
And Barry, of
Okay,
course,
everybody.
also thank you so much for helping me out also with on so many channels.
Yeah, that was
And
great.
before I forget, yeah, of course, I love to do an update with you and maybe even, well, let's keep contact. And
Yeah.
I'm very eager to know when there is a confirmation. I myself also try to
Oh,
keep up
yeah.
with the
Big.
MSM, the mainstream media, in this, but to come back to what you said, like you are the only one who's reporting it, and I searched, but I cannot find anyone else who is reporting this. And this
That's
is so
bizarre.
bizarre. This is the most bizarre thing. I mean, they don't have to believe you, but
No.
why? Yeah, it is.
When you paint the picture I painted tonight, do you want to let international teams come in? Never heard of that before. Do you want to let
Exactly.
helicopters go out there? Never heard of that before.
Mm,
People still abandoned 13 days later. Never heard of that before. When all that it's only 100 kilometers long, 100 miles long. There's all the helicopters can go out there and back on one tank of fuel, and so there's no logical reason that they're avoiding helping people.
yeah,
30,000 people survived for over 10 days on one slice of bread and one cup of water. Not a glass, but a cup of water.
yeah.
I've never heard of it. I've never heard of that before.
It is.
The
It
list,
is.
the list is very long.
Yeah, and before we really go to, because we can talk, we can keep on talking. But I
No, let's
was
let's
when you
give it
were,
up and we'll call it a
yeah.
night. Yeah.
But when you were mentioning it, like I was thinking, in 2011 at least, there were more reports
Oh,
and there were more videos of
there
the
was. Yeah.
tsunami. Yeah, I hardly can find any
Now
images.
there's no descending voices whatsoever. I mean,
Mm, exactly.
and that's frightening for me.
It
That's
is.
frightening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if they silence me, then we got nobody else out there.
Mm,
And so I've done my best since January 1st. I haven't stopped. It's been relentless to get everybody at least acclimated to the facts, right? And I can't come up with any other reason, only a nuclear meltdown at the Shika nuclear plant fuel pools on top of reactor one, at least, if not both. Okay, good stuff. Are we going to call her a night, I guess, at this stage? Because otherwise, I'm going to start talking again and you're never going to get rid of me.
yeah, I can also keep on talking. No, it's beautiful way to close off, and again to everyone. I saw your comments come by. I'm so grateful for all your comments, your questions. Maybe we even skipped a question accidentally. Then I apologize for that. But I think Dana talked about a lot of, told a lot of information and deep information. And yeah, I'm so grateful you were for the seventh time here
Yeah,
in
it's
my live
great.
stream,
It's fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate it.
and
It's
look
huge.
forward to another one, Dana.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's, you know it's coming.
I
You
know it's
know it's going to
coming, and for
happen. Yeah.
sure with the updates, and we will manage something that I can stream that also when there's an update. That but we will find a way to combine that even maybe, and also to
Yeah.
someone on YouTube mentioned like that Quinn that did not know that this live stream was happening. It is what I also found out just now. I only saw 10 minutes ago a notification of YouTube that I was live, so I
Oh,
don't know
wow.
why it is a weird thing happening, and some channels did not go along with the run, so with the live stream, but I let go, and people can always re-watch it, of course,
Yeah.
and check out Dana's website. It's down below, and as well, of course, his YouTube channel. Please subscribe, and thank you again, Barry Henderson, and everyone who is supporting our channels. Thank you so much, and yeah, I hope to see you next time. And I plan on going Tuesday evening, by the way, to go English live, and that will then be about my Deep State MK Ultra Past and of a recent happening, but I will talk about that. And yeah, Dana, again, thank you so much. Do you have
Yeah,
some
thank you.
words to say goodbye or some last
No,
words?
that's, I think I pretty well said enough tonight.
Yeah. All right, dear people, just
You
hang
got to
on
watch
a
me.
bit still, Dana, so don't go
Nice
away.
meeting everybody. Thank you, everybody,
All
for having the
right.
courage to hear the truth. We'll see you, Ray. I'm gone. Take care, everybody. Have a
All
great
right,
night. Yeah.
everybody. Bye bye. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.